Ju Ping'an sat on the ground and sighed for the 10,086th time. Her heart ached terribly, and she thought fate had treated her extremely unfairly. Memories drifted through her mind. Back in a certain year and month before she was born, a severe infectious disease suddenly spread across the country. Her father, a medical worker, volunteered to offer support and never came home. Her mother told her all about this later. In high school, she lagged far behind in several subjects and couldn't get into university through the regular college entrance exam track. Like many of her classmates, she chose art as an alternative path to higher education. Fortunately, her efforts paid off. She ranked among the top 300 in the Provincial Unified Art Examination and scored more than a dozen points above the cutoff for Category A art majors in the National College Entrance Exam. Yet fate was endlessly fickle. That summer after the exam, Ju Ping'an went to work odd jobs in another city with her mother. It was her first time doing heavy manual labor, and her body couldn't endure it. She headed back to their rental house before the first day even ended. She had cooked dinner and was waiting for her mother when someone banged violently on the front door. Her mother had fallen off a truck while unloading goods and died instantly on the spot. Ju Ping'an could not recall how she made it through that day. Her whole body trembled, cold to the bone. The business owner held considerable wealth and influence in the area, and as an underage girl, she had no power to fight him. No one cared about the lives of ordinary folk. Her relatives all made excuses to stay away when she needed help most. Once the owner paid a hasty compensation sum, those same relatives flocked to her like cats catching the scent of fish. They bombarded her with words like, "You're still a minor, let us hold this money for you first. We're your family, we'd never hurt you. What trouble could an orphan like you possibly stir up?" When her mother was alive, her paternal uncles, aunts, grandparents had constantly taken advantage of her, claiming that as the eldest son's widow, she was obligated to wait on her in-laws. Now that her mother was gone, their ugly true natures laid bare for all to see. Ju Ping'an knew she could not protect the money on her own. After submitting her college application, she gathered all her documents, including the property deed to her family's rural home, and left alone to find work in a distant city. She turned down the admission offer from the art college she had worked so hard to get into. Instead, she enrolled in a junior college nursing program. She studied relentlessly and passed the exam to upgrade to a bachelor's degree program, graduating from a first-tier university in due time. She endured grueling internships and clinical rotations, and the day she was set to become a full staff member finally arrived. After working 10 consecutive days with barely any rest, she was mentally worn thin. As she walked past a patient's ward, an object the patient threw struck her head, knocking her unconscious immediately. When she woke again, she was lying alone on unfamiliar grass, surrounded by a vast stretch of lush forest. She had nothing with her, wearing only plain white top and trousers. Tucked in the pocket of her top were a few red and blue pens, medical adhesive plasters, and surgical tape. She broke down into loud, unrestrained sobs, shouting hoarsely into the woods, "I've never harmed a single person in my life. I've even saved countless patients. My father sacrificed himself before I was even born, and my mother never received proper compensation or a sincere apology for her death. Our ordinary family never got to live a peaceful, safe life." Just then, a crisp ding echoed inside her head. Ju Ping'an thought she had imagined it at first, until a translucent blue virtual screen materialized and floated right in front of her eyes. Ding! Detected extreme grievances and an unjust fate where good deeds brought no good fortune. This system has arrived with compensation to help you survive in this new world. Ju Ping'an stared at the scrolling text on the light screen. The words shifted continuously. This system features a point mall, where you can exchange accumulated points for any goods you need. You may also complete daily check-ins 3 times per day to draw special supplies. Note: the point mall will remain accessible for 24 hours only. Daily check-in rewards will be available for 30 days. Once these time limits expire, both functions will disappear permanently. Ju Ping'an calmed down after processing the rules. She stretched a finger toward the empty air to check her point balance. Bold red font stood out. 0 points. System, why do I have 0 points? My house and bank savings were all intact back in my original world. I was suddenly pulled into this strange realm. Those assets should be converted into points for me. There was no immediate reply. After roughly 10 seconds, it was as if the system had traveled back to her original world to tally all her belongings. A string of rapid ding sounds rang out in her mind, and the screen flooded with dense lines of text. Ding. Detected a 3-story, 420-square-meter rural residence. The house and all items inside are converted into 600,000 points. Ding. Detected a dilapidated 280-square-meter brick cottage in the countryside. The cottage and all items inside are converted into 400,000 points. Ding. Detected 7 mu of rural farmland. The land is converted into 210,000 points. Ding. Detected a garden plot fully planted with strawberry bushes. The plot is converted into 50,000 points. Ding. Detected a wooded plot filled with poplar, persimmon, and jujube trees. The plot is converted into 150,000 points. Ding. Detected personal savings totaling 156,800. Given the unfair compensation settlement and the malicious attempts by relatives to seize your funds, a supplementary conversion is granted, adding 500,000 points. Total accumulated points, 1,910,000. Additional compensation will be distributed through daily check-in draws of critical survival supplies to guarantee your survival in this foreign world. Staring at the long trail of zeros, Zhu Ping'an's eyes went wide. If she had possessed this much wealth back then, none of the subsequent tragedies would have happened. But there were no do-overs, no way to turn back time. Zhu Ping'an took a deep breath. With such a massive point balance, she would have ample resources to sustain herself going forward. She opened the system's point mall, greeted by an overwhelming array of goods sorted into categories: daily groceries, food, textiles, medical supplies, and more. She clicked through each category to browse the listings. Prices were comparable to those in her old world. 1.91 million points would support her comfortably for multiple lifetimes. She was about to place bulk orders when a critical thought hit her. Wait, where would she store all these supplies? She could not possibly haul millions of supplies around on foot. Would she have to build a house in this wild forest? Even if she started construction right away, she could never finish a building large enough to hold everything. Within the mall's 24-hour opening window. System, are you there? Where can I store all these purchases? I don't even have a roof over my head yet. Am I supposed to build a shelter out here in the wilderness? I can't finish a proper storage house in just 24 hours. You may complete your daily check-in first to claim special reward items. Zhu Ping'an could practically sense the system's wordless exasperation, though she could not blame herself for asking. No ordinary person would suddenly be ripped away from their home and thrown into an unfamiliar mountain wilderness. Asking questions was the only way to learn. She saw no shame in seeking guidance, especially when her survival depended on it. She never pretended to know things she did not understand and always asked for help openly. She tapped the floating screen to complete her first daily check-in. Ding! Check-in successful. Congratulations on receiving special rewards: static storage space ×1, indestructible residence ×1, black puppy ×1. Zhu Ping'an pressed one hand to her chest and quickly pulled up the detailed descriptions for each reward, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Static storage space: all items placed within will remain exactly as they were when stored. Living creatures cannot enter the space. Activate with a drop of blood. Total usable area: 500 square meters. Oh my goodness. 500 square meters of storage room, far larger than her 3-story family home back in the village. It could hold enough provisions to last her many lifetimes, and nothing stored inside would spoil. She clicked to claim the reward. A thin pale green jade bracelet materialized before her, slimmer than her pinky finger. Etched with subtle rippling water patterns. Simple yet exquisitely beautiful. Zhu Ping'an tried biting her fingertip to draw blood like she had seen in television dramas. But the skin on her finger was too thick to break. She considered pricking herself with one of her pens, then another idea popped into her head. She had barely drunk any water these past few days, and her lips were cracked and bleeding. She gently peeled back the broken skin on her lip and pressed the bracelet against the wound. A faint streak of blood smeared across the jade. A soft flash of light erupted, and her consciousness connected to a blank white dimension stretching far outwards. With a consistent 2-meter ceiling height, she slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, and it shrank automatically to fit perfectly. The system had thought of every small convenience. She silently wished the bracelet could turn invisible, and it vanished from sight instantly. When she whispered "appear," it materialized again. She sighed in wonder. Truly advanced technology. She pulled up the description for indestructible residence. Indestructible residence. You may visualize your ideal layout and appearance to generate the building to match your wishes. The structure is impervious to all external damage. Note, only a basic approximation of your vision can be created. Do not expect flawless detail, as this is not an all-powerful wishing well. Perfect. This was incredible. Back in her original world, she would have needed to work non-stop well into her 30s just to afford a fully paid house, plus additional huge costs for renovations and furniture. Now she had a custom-built, unbreakable home with no labor or expense required. Lastly, she read the entry for Black Puppy. Black Puppy, your beloved pet from your original world. An ordinary little dog who loves meat and roaming around freely. Tears welled up in Zhu Ping'an's eyes again. The system was far kinder than she could have imagined. She had spent countless nights worrying about what would become of her gluttonous, energetic puppy after she was gone. Left alone, the dog would have starved or thirsted to death within 10 days at most. Now the puppy had crossed over to this world with her. Her companion, her comfort, her only remaining family. The loss of her parents had left her crippled by loneliness for years. Every night, she either lay awake with insomnia or woke screaming from nightmares that replayed all her painful memories. She had taken both traditional Chinese herbal medicine and Western psychiatric medication for years, pouring money into treatment with no meaningful improvement. Hospitals eventually diagnosed her with severe anxiety and depressive disorder. No combination of therapies had eased her suffering. Desperate for any solution, she heard old rural folklore that 5 black dogs could ward off negative spiritual influences. She asked a roommate from Guangxi to help purchase one, paid all travel and service fees up front, and arranged a dedicated pet transport vehicle. But the seller backed out at the last minute. Overwhelmed by helplessness, she cried alone all night, no puppy, and all her money wasted. Her frustration boiled over the next day. She messaged the seller to condemn their dishonesty, pointing out their selfish choice to renege on the deal and refuse refunds. She shared screenshots of their conversation on her social media feed before blocking and deleting their contact, even leaving her dorm group chat. Zhu Ping'an told herself their bond had simply not been meant to be, yet grief lingered heavy in her heart. Grief over trusting the wrong person, grief over her own powerlessness. A month later, fate brought her another chance. One morning while browsing a second-hand trading platform, she spotted a listing for a 5 black puppy from a neighboring province. She paid the seller immediately, took a short cross-city bus ride, and brought the puppy home the same morning. When the puppy first arrived, it howled every night without pause. For an entire week, Zhu Ping'an only managed to sleep in the brief lulls between its cries. Even with the constant nighttime noise, she adored the puppy fiercely. Its lively energy was something she had not felt around her in a very long time. She cared for it meticulously. Regular baths, parasite prevention, all required vaccinations, homemade nutritious dog meals, and daily walks. She watched it grow bigger and stronger with every passing day. The puppy meant everything to her. Still, balancing long hospital shifts with pet care exhausted her. Early morning walks, post-work walks, evening walks. She felt constant guilt locking the dog in its crate while she worked, so she extended every outing and played with its toys for hours whenever possible. Most of all, she loved watching it bound around joyfully, gobble down its food eagerly, and stay faithfully by her side. It chased away the crushing loneliness that haunted her constantly. She had long decided she would never marry or have children, and she poured all her quiet affection into raising the puppy as if it were her own child. Now was not the time to let the puppy out. She still had dozens of critical tasks to finish, and a quick glance at the mall countdown made her jump. Far more time had slipped away than she realized. She needed to finish purchasing supplies quickly before the mall access expired. She scanned her surroundings, endless towering trees blocking most sunlight, the distant forest fading into a shadowy, near-black haze. A cold wind swept through the branches, sending goosebumps crawling across her skin. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself, unnerved by the eerie wilderness. First, she needed to find a safe spot to place her new residence. Once the house was set up, it would shield her from the countless unknown dangers lurking in these woods. She had no confidence she could fend off wild animals once night fully fell. First, she purchased a book titled How to Set Up Safe Shelter in the Wilderness, then flipped through its pages while surveying the terrain to pick the optimal building location. Excerpts from the book read, "When setting up shelter in mountain forests, selecting the right location is your top priority. It directly determines your safety. Treat scouting a campsite like a detective investigating a case, and identify all hidden hazards ahead of time. Avoid dangerous terrain. Never camp deep in valley basins, beneath steep cliffs, beside dammed lakes or riverbanks. These areas face high risks of falling rock debris, flash floods, and mudslides. Inspect overhead and surrounding terrain. Look up to check for loose stones and dead rotting trees that could collapse without warning. Steer clear of weathered rock formations and crumbling old walls as well. Choose dry, sunlit ground. Seek shelter on wind-sheltered, flat slopes exposed to sunlight. This keeps your body dry and lowers the risk of hypothermia. Stay clear of animal territories. Check the ground for wildlife tracks, droppings, or dens, signs that the area is a frequent animal trail or claimed territory. Move elsewhere if you spot any of these markers. Stay near water, but stay elevated. Proximity to fresh water eases daily living, but build shelter on higher ground to avoid submersion during flood events. Zhu Ping and read every word carefully, focusing fully on scouting for the ideal building plot. By the time the sun dipped toward the horizon and dusk began creeping in, she finally found a suitable spot. It sat roughly 4 to 5 kilometers from a water source, an easy problem to solve by stockpiling massive reserves of bottled water from the mall. The land here was flat and clear of loose stones, set back far enough from the deep forest with elevated ground offering an unobstructed panoramic view of all surrounding terrain. She pulled out the indestructible residence reward and tapped to begin construction. She folded her hands and closed her eyes, clearly visualizing every detail of the home she wanted to live in. A thick cloud of white mist bloomed from the ground, shrouding the construction site completely. The clanging and banging of unseen building work echoed from within the fog. Zhu Pingyan reached out to touch the mist, but an invisible barrier blocked her hand entirely, an anti-observation safety feature built into the system. Even if she could peer inside, she lacked the skill to build a house by hand anyway. A system notification popped up. Remaining construction time, 0 hours 59 minutes 59 seconds. She estimated she had arrived in the woods around midday. Time had slipped by as she spoke with the system and searched for a building spot. And sunset was nearly here. She had no phone with her. It must have fallen when she fainted at the hospital. So she could only guess the time, likely around 6 in the evening. She was endlessly grateful she had started building the house first. She would have been terrified stuck out here alone after dark. She stared toward the distant woods, where shadowy green foliage swirled with faint white mist, a deeply unsettling sight. Her eyesight was 500 degrees nearsighted. Even with corrective lenses, her vision only reached 1.0. This left faraway shapes blurred and indistinct. The forest fell unnervingly silent, save for the low wailing of wind through treetops. Zhu Pingyan held her breath, scanning every shadow with sharp vigilance. She was too on edge to focus on shopping for supplies in the mall. She feared wild creatures might leap out from the trees at any moment, like the jump scares she had seen in horror films. She waited anxiously for the residents to finish building, while chiding herself for having such an overactive imagination. Minutes dragged on one by one. Zhu Pingyan kept watch over her surroundings without daring to eat or drink. She clutched a wood-cutting knife she had just bought from the mall as a self-defense tool. Darkness swallowed the landscape completely. A thin crescent moon hung overhead, dotted with sparse faint stars. At last, the familiar chime sounded. Ding! Your residence construction is complete. Enter and explore your new home. Zhu Pingyan hurried forward, stepped inside, and latched the courtyard gate shut. She purchased a heavy solid lock from the mall to secure the gate, slid the wooden bolt into place, then jammed 2 thick wooden poles behind the door as an extra barricade. She repeated the exact safety steps for the main house entrance. She bought a simple chair and table, then placed several solar-powered floodlights across the table and open courtyard space. Bright light flooded every corner of the house, chasing away the fear stirred by endless darkness. Only after finishing all these safety preparations did she slump into the chair and exhale a long, deep breath. A sharp wave of hunger crashed over her, sharp enough to send stabbing pains through her empty stomach. She had not eaten in hours, and starting a fire to cook was a waste of precious small browsing time. She bought 3 loaves of bread, 1 cooked chicken leg, a can of preserved fruit, and a bottle of mineral water, eating ravenously until her hunger faded and strength returned to her limbs. Full and rested, she pulled out paper and a pen to draft a comprehensive supply shopping list, sorting all essential goods into categories in her mind. Basic daily necessities: clothing, food, housing, transport, emergency preserved food. General medical supplies: all varieties of crop and vegetable seeds, protective gear and hand tools, vehicles and transport equipment, pet care supplies, household daily goods, instructional reference books of all kinds, and many more essential items. Zhu Ping'an decided to prioritize purchasing essential goods she could not manufacture herself, launching an all-out shopping spree. Foot-operated generators, bicycle-powered generators, solar panels, gasoline, diesel fuel, all varieties of lamps. She bought power banks, charging cables, storage batteries, solar generators, candles, lighters, flintstones, magnesium fire starters, fishing supplies, multi-purpose toolboxes, assorted farming implements, hairdressing supplies, scissors, and an array of blades. These included boning knives, watermelon slicers, logging axes and tang swords, bows, crossbows, rope, raincoats, rubber boots, umbrellas, portable gas stoves, alcohol fuel blocks, gas canisters, water purification tablets, binoculars, and night vision goggles. She also added compasses, safety goggles, protective coveralls, gas masks, electric fans, air conditioners, baskets, and back carriers of all sizes, basins, water buckets, water vats, chopsticks, spoons, spatulas, and full sets of tableware. Furthermore, she acquired refrigerators, freezers, and a vast assortment of household furnishings, alongside 500 tons of high-quality smokeless anthracite coal, 100 tons of coal briquettes, and 5,000 jean of pine needles. She added pine cones for kindling, 5,000 jean of firewood, 5,000 jean of corn cobs, 50 fireplaces, 50 coal stoves, thermoses, hot water bags, and countless hand warmers. For health needs, she bought N95 masks, disposable civilian masks, surgical medical masks, cold medicine, fever-reducing tablets, gastrointestinal remedies, painkillers, anti-inflammatory drugs, disinfectants, hemostatic supplies, burn ointment, and heat stroke treatments. She included medicine for insect, snake, and rodent bites, Lyme, realgar, mugwort, trauma care kits, a full set of surgical instruments, thermometers, blood pressure monitors, and countless adhesive bandages. Apparel purchases featured underwear, thermal base layers, short-sleeved shirts, long johns, trousers, lightweight jackets, socks, windproof jackets and trousers, cotton coats, down jackets, goose down outerwear, and thin cotton waistcoats. She added traditional style robes, waterproof shoes, sandals, cotton slippers, polar cold-resistant boots, climbing shoes, and many other footwear options. She bought multiple sets in her own size as well as slightly larger and smaller cuts. This included all men's and women's styles, since men's apparel generally boasted better craftsmanship. For drinks, she selected bottled mineral water from all major brands, fruit drinks, milk, electrolyte replenishment water, and energy drinks. Food stocks held all types of grain including polished rice, millet, pearl rice, and unhusked rice, cooking oils such as Arowana brand and soybean oil, flours of low and high gluten grades. Legumes included red beans, mung beans, and soybeans, meat varieties covering chicken, beef, duck, pork, and goose, seafood including scallops, prawns, river snails, clams, grass carp, crucian carp, and common carp. Vegetables such as shiitake, oyster, and shimeji mushrooms, Chinese greens, chives, broccoli, cabbage, and cucumbers, canned goods, hot pot ingredients, ice cream, convenient instant foods like instant noodles, spicy stir-fry noodles. She also chose self-heated rice and self-cooking hot pot, fruits including watermelons, peaches, oranges, apples, pitayas, ginseng fruits, durian, and cherries, snacks such as bread, compressed biscuits, chocolate, potato chips, and sunflower seeds. Snacks also included marinated chicken feet, duck necks, spicy strips, and assorted candies, eggs of chicken, duck, goose, preserved duck eggs, and century eggs. Seasonings included chicken bouillon, monosodium glutamate, table salt, sugar, soy sauce, and sesame oil. Books, paper, and writing utensils covered farming, tree cultivation, wilderness survival, traditional Chinese medicine, Western medicine, mental wellness, and pet care. Pet supplies included clippers, litter pads, and parasite repellents. Feminine hygiene products of all brands, toilet paper, reusable menstrual care devices, sanitary pads, overnight absorbent underwear, wet wipes, and toilet cleansing wipes, body wash, shampoo, skincare creams, and sunscreen lotion. Seeds for all seasonal vegetables, fruit tree seeds, rice, corn, and mushroom spawn. Bicycles, tricycles, two-wheeled electric scooters, three-wheeled electric vehicles, and mountain bikes. She originally wanted trucks and cargo vans, but their steep prices forced her to abandon the idea. Year-round bedding sets, 5-jean, 8-jean, 10-jean, and 12-jean quilts, silk duvets, feather comforters. She added goose-down blankets, cooling mats, mattresses, and bed linens. Valuable staple goods included liquor, beer, rice wine, and various teas. Beyond all of this, she purchased countless storage racks and miscellaneous sundries. These would later help her sort and categorize all stockpiled supplies. By this point, nearly all her points had been exhausted, with only a tiny remainder reserved for last-minute forgotten purchases. Ju Ping'an had suffered from insomnia the night before, compounded by a full day of exhausting errands. Mentally and physically drained, and weighed down by constant anxiety, she hastily laid out a mattress on a new bed. She wrapped herself in blankets and fell asleep. Before drifting off, she set an alarm for 4 hours later, planning to resume restocking and inventory sorting upon waking. Yet her rest was far from peaceful. Her sleep was filled with bizarre, disjointed nightmares. She dreamed of being bullied by village neighbors while home alone as a child, of intruders breaking into her house at night intending to rob and harm her. This left her frozen in place, unable to flee. She also dreamed of sitting for middle school and college entrance exams without having studied a single lesson. Clutching her admission ticket, she wandered endlessly. She searched for the exam hall, or finally located a desk only to stare blankly at the test paper with no answers to write, overcome with crippling stress until the bell signaled the end of the exam. Strangely enough, she had never once neglected her studies in real life, leaving her dreams a stark opposite of reality. Her eyes squeezed shut, she struggled fruitlessly to rouse herself. She was trapped between sleep and wakefulness in a state akin to sleep paralysis, a dream within a dream. After an indeterminate stretch of time, the shrill alarm blared, and Ping'an finally forced her eyes open. She was soaked from head to toe as if pulled from a river, sweat coating her forehead and back. Soft daylight filtered through the window. Dawn had broken. Her limbs felt heavy and weak. Alternating between chills and waves of heat, her cheeks burned hot. She touched her face and realized she had developed a fever. Her constitution had always been frail, troubled by liver stagnation and dual deficiency. She suffered from yin and yang imbalances, painful monthly cramps, cold womb, chronic insomnia, and recurring nightmares, burdened by nearly every physical ailment imaginable. Prolonged exhaustion always left her vulnerable to fevers and colds. Dragging her aching body, she retrieved medicine, washed down fever and cold tablets with mineral water, then curled back under the covers to rest. When she woke a second time, she pulled up her system interface. She saw 2.5 hours remained until the mall closed permanently. Thankfully, she had bought nearly every supply she could think of, so panic did not overwhelm her. She ate 2 loaves of bread and a salted duck egg, drank a bottle of water, and steeled herself to begin working. She unlocked and pushed open the front door to find the sun fully risen. Its warm glow fell across her face. Ping'an began inspecting her reinforced residence. The courtyard stretched wide, enclosed by 7-meter-high perimeter walls lined along the top with 1-meter iron nails and shards of broken glass. Meanwhile, sharp thorny brambles covered the outer base of the walls. She silently repeated the measurements of the wall to herself several times. Plagued by a lack of security, she still felt shaken. By her nightmares, she worried the walls might be too short to stop people or wild animals from climbing over. She hoped these towering barriers would shield her and shelter the version of herself trapped helpless. To the right of the main house sat a spacious kitchen connected to the living room by an internal door, so she would never get caught in rain carrying meals back and forth. This was a painful memory from her childhood old home, where she always wound up soaked running food from the kitchen when it stormed. She had specifically requested the kitchen adjoin the living room for this reason. The kitchen spanned roughly 20 square meters, with a full wall of screened windows directly across from the entrance, fitted with ultra-fine mesh to block every insect from entering. This fine screening lined every window in the entire property. She held a deep aversion to bugs and rats, creatures she found utterly detestable. Countertops wrapped halfway around the windows and right wall. These featured 2 integrated sinks, one for washing vegetables, one for scrubbing dishes, and a full bank of storage cabinets beneath. Though she had wished for running water taps, none had materialized. This was likely due to the lack of municipal water and electricity on this land. 2 hollow stove pits occupied the kitchen's center. She set 2 iron woks atop them, and white mist swirled around. The mist gathered at the joints between pans and stone stoves. Once the haze cleared, the seams sealed seamlessly without gaps. She set a small portable stove beside the pits, placing a clay pot atop it. This was to boil drinking water or simmer congee. A 3-meter gap separated the woks from the far kitchen wall, leaving ample space to stack firewood in the corner for cooking fuel. Against one wall stood a large sideboard, 2 meters tall, 30 centimeters wide, and 1.3 meters long. Inside, she neatly arranged a set of pale turquoise ceramic tableware, auxiliary pots, and mugs. Gazing at her ideal kitchen, Pingin's heart swelled with delight. Cooking delicious meals in a bright, roomy, well-fitted kitchen was one of life's greatest joys to her. She had initially planned to build a basement, but the thought of dark underground spaces teeming with rats filled her with dread. Besides, the 500-square-meter house already offered more than enough storage space. This was sufficient for a single resident, so she discarded the basement idea entirely. Stepping through the connecting door, she entered the vast living room. A wide-screened window faced the main entrance wall. This window was again fitted with dense mesh to keep pests out. 2 empty 20-square-meter rooms stood off the main hall, reserved as stockrooms to be organized later at her leisure. A separate bedroom held a heated earthen kang bed. Winters had always been her hardest season in her old life. No matter how many electric blankets, hot water bags, or space heaters she used, she stayed cold. Her hands and feet stayed perpetually icy through the night, only warming briefly before dawn forced her out of bed. With only one chance to design the house, she had requested a ground-floor Kong bed. In the cold months, heat from kitchen cooking fires would channel straight into the mattress, banishing her lifelong struggle with frigid limbs. Additional spaces included a laundry room, a full bathing chamber, and a restroom. This was a split wet-dry restroom fitted with a ceramic flush toilet. When she pressed the handle, clean water flowed, eliminating all worries about sanitation needs. Returning to the living room, she positioned a sofa. She placed a fabric sofa against one wall with a low round coffee table, laying a linen rug in front of the seating area. Nearby stood a rectangular dining table with 2 wooden chairs and a sideboard. A staircase led up to the second floor, which featured another open living room she left unfurnished, saving decoration for quieter days ahead. The second floor also contained a split wet-dry washroom and laundry room. It also included a bathing chamber and 3 private bedrooms. Bedroom 1 held a vintage 4-poster canopy bed fitted with a medium-firm mattress and draped with soft bed curtains. Matching curtains hung across the north and south windows, and a balcony stretched out to the west, perfect for sipping tea, enjoying breezes, or hanging laundry to dry. Pingin checked and confirmed kitchen chimney smoke would never drift toward this balcony. Bedroom 2 featured a bunk bed with a ladder on the left and a slide on the right. She loved climbing to the top bunk and sliding back down onto the floor. 2 mattresses lined the frame, and heavy blackout curtains covered both windows. Bedroom 3 housed an oversized bed. This bed measured 2.2 meters by 2.4 meters, featuring curtained windows and a rear door opening onto a far larger balcony than the one attached to bedroom 1. The third floor consisted of a spacious attic. A corridor led to a watchtower observation post, from which she could survey the surrounding landscape and fire arrows at intruders from a safe distance. Standing atop the watchtower, she spotted a small outbuilding in the courtyard corner built as a washing station for her black dog, flanked by a firewood shed and livestock pens for future animals. These spaces could later be used to raise chickens, ducks, or cattle. Only 1 hour remained until the mall vanished, when Pingin suddenly realized she had forgotten to place heating fixtures. She rushed to all 3 bedrooms and installed large masonry fireplaces in each, which the system automatically fused into the wall structure, sparing her the grueling work of chiseling brickwork alone. Sparing her from fitting flues alone, she still stocked masonry chisels and construction tools as a backup precaution. Fireplaces were also fitted in the attic, main living room, and 2 empty storage chambers. 30 minutes remained on the countdown timer. Pingin racked her brain, trying to recall any overlooked supplies. Summer heat suddenly crossed her mind. While she had purchased solar panels and generators, she felt unsure. She could not be certain their power output would suffice to cool the home through sweltering seasons. She spent her last remaining points purchasing potassium nitrate for homemade cooling solutions. Once her balance hit zero, a flicker of nervousness washed over her. She had planned to stockpile more bottled drinking water, and now worried whether her current reserves would last. "Stay calm, don't spiral into panic," she told herself. "I can draw fresh water from the nearby stream for washing clothes and bathing, and collect snow through winter to store away. I can also gather rainwater. And winter ice stored in my spatial inventory will never melt. I can pull it out to cool the house during hot summer days." A small smile tugged at her lips as she congratulated herself on the sustainable resource cycle she had planned. She recalled an old question she had seen online once. "What kind of person would you marry?" "Someone just like myself," she answered silently. If her partner shared her own temperament and mindset, marriage would not feel so intimidating. Ping'an firmly believed she was a kind, dependable person. With no shopping points left and all critical supplies secured, she sank onto the living room sofa to wait quietly. A blood-red countdown timer floated across the translucent system screen. Countdown to mall closure. 30s, 29s. 3s, 2s, 1s. The 24-hour shopping window has expired. System mall permanently closed. Oddly enough, Ping'an felt a weight lift off her shoulders. This was much like the relief she experienced before major exams. In the lead-up to testing, she would spiral into anxiety, poring over every textbook terrified of missing key material. But once seated inside the exam hall, her mind settled. No further changes could be made, leaving only quick thinking to carry her through. Fortunately, she had always scored well on exams. Except for high school mathematics. A thought suddenly struck her, and she tapped the system icon labeled Black Dog ×1. In an instant, a puppy materialized before her eyes. "Heisey," Ping'an called out joyfully. "Woof, woof, woof." The black dog yipped in excited reply. Having been separated from his owner for far too long, Heisey bounded forward and leaped into her open arms, barking nonstop. Ping'an's heart warmed with joy, mixed with pity for the dog who had waited alone for her. She retrieved 4 sealed packs of chicken and duck drumsticks from her spatial storage, plus 2 sturdy basins. One to serve as a food bowl, the other a water dish. Heisey tore eagerly into the meat, gulping down chunks without proper chewing. He was unused to sharing his meals with any other animals. Ping'an heated a self-cooking hot pot for herself. Minutes later, the broth bubbled vigorously, releasing a rich, spicy aroma. Despite the appealing scent, the meal tasted dreadful. The wide rice noodles chewed like adhesive tape, and the pre-packaged meat carried an unpleasant stale flavor. She forced down only a few bites. Every time she visited supermarkets in her old life, she could not resist stocking up on self-heated rice, hot pot, and spicy noodle packs. Yet none had ever tasted satisfying. These instant meals paled in comparison to food cooked fresh over an earthen stove, which carried an unmatched comforting flavor. Food cooked over rural wood-fired stoves had nourished her deeply during primary school, when her mother prepared all 3 daily meals on one. Back then, she brimmed with energy, swimming in creeks and climbing trees with the mischievous energy of a monkey. As she grew older, her body steadily weakened. Simply rising from bed would leave her dizzy and lightheaded. And she had gained excess weight up to 140 kg due to chronic poor health. It was only as an adult that she learned the old rural wisdom. Fire from sun-grown timber was known as yang fire. Bright and steady. Cooking atop an earthen stove heated by this natural flame was gentlest and most nourishing for the digestive system. The whole setup embodied the 5 natural elements: metal in cookware, wood for fuel, earth in the stove structure, water for boiling ingredients, and fire for heating, a cooking method perfectly aligned with the rhythms of nature. By contrast, natural gas and coal were mined from lightless underground depths, their flames carrying imbalanced energy, and self-heating packet meals ranked as the least nourishing of all. In her past urban life, she had endured cramped, overpriced tiny apartments, commuting from dawn till dusk with barely any sunlight touching her skin. Returning home exhausted each night, she lacked the strength to exercise. Caught in a vicious cycle, fatigue prevented movement, and inactivity worsened her frailty, with no clear way to break the loop. Now, transported to this new world, she was freed from financial pressure and the burden of housing costs. A heavy knot of suppressed frustration untangled in her chest. With her secure residence and spatial stockpile guaranteeing safety, she could live out her days in peace. Yet, she had no intention of merely surviving in seclusion. This transmigration marked a rare second chance after a harsh former life marked by early loss of her father. Then her mother in her teenage years, leaving her adrift with no permanent home. She had never fit into crowded cities, yet returning to rural villages as a lone young woman meant constant unfair targeting and exploitation. Urban apartment living subjected her to endless noise from neighbors above, below, and beside her. Humming elevator machinery and the rumble of bicycle tires outside her windows. For years, she could only sleep wearing noise-canceling earplugs. She had always hated city living. The vast world had never offered her a true place to belong. Endless work to earn money had been her sole purpose. With a quiet, unspoken dream to escape to an isolated land where no one knew her. Where she would not face unfair treatment for being a woman, to build a small house big enough only for herself and her dog. Back then, that dream had felt unattainable. She could never calculate how much money she would need to buy rural land for construction or rent a sufficiently quiet city apartment. Each day blurred into the last, rising mechanically to repeat grueling labor, enduring unfair treatment from elders and relentless exploitation without proper rest. Now every part of that long-held dream had come true. This time, she would craft a life entirely different from the one she had left behind. "Don't be afraid, Ping'an," she clenched her fist and called toward the courtyard doorway. "You can do this. You're strong enough to build a good life for yourself." She suddenly remembered she had yet to claim her daily check-in lottery reward and opened the system page at once. Ding! Daily check-in complete. Congratulations on receiving special items. Defective pet evolution pill ×1, pet storage pouch ×1, magic disposal bin ×1. Ping'an gasped in surprise at the reward names, struck by a feeling as though she had stepped into a Xianxia cultivation novel. She tapped each item icon to pull up their detailed descriptions. Failed pet evolution pill. Used for pet evolution. After consumption, it triggers random pet evolution. Yet its potency is drastically weakened due to its flawed production. Pet satchel. An essential travel item that can store a single pet inside. Pets placed within will automatically recover their wounds and mental stamina. Only one pet may be held per satchel. Magic trash can. Tired of having nowhere to dispose of garbage? This trash can solve all such troubles. Any rubbish tossed inside will instantly decompose and vanish without a trace. Good heavens! Ping'an clapped a hand over her mouth in shock. What kind of bizarre world had she stumbled into, filled with such miraculous objects? She resolved to explore this extraordinary place when the chance arose. Ping'an tapped the claim button, and a rich medicinal fragrance washed over her, instantly clearing her mind and lifting her spirits. Resting in her palm was a milky white pill etched with intricate, elaborate patterns that held a strange, ethereal beauty. This was merely a failed pet evolution pill. She could only imagine how powerful a perfected version would be. "Xiaohei, come here," Ping'an called out at once. The puppy trotted over on tiny paws, tilting its head to gaze up at its owner, utterly adorable. Ping'an stroked its furry head and warm little paws, soft as always beneath her fingers. "Eat this, and you'll evolve." She tossed the pill into the air. Xiaohei leaped, snapped it up with a tiny yip, and swallowed it whole without a single chew. Ping'an laughed and gave its head a gentle pat. "You greedy thing, what if someone lures you away with food someday?" Her dog was perfect in every way, save for its insatiable appetite. In her old world, there were cruel, bitter people who left poisoned treats along sidewalks to harm dogs out of malice. For that reason, she never let Xiaohei off its leash, terrified it would swallow something toxic when she wasn't watching. Xiaohei wagged its tail wildly, eager for more treats from its owner. "Be good, pup. We'll eat later. First we need to check if this pill has any side effects." A short while passed. The normally energetic puppy suddenly collapsed onto the floor. Ping'an's heart skipped a beat, rushing to press her hand to its belly, relieved to feel its steady, rising and falling breath. She let out a sigh of relief. The pill's effects had simply sent it into a deep slumber. It reminded her of novels she'd read, where protagonists swallowed elixirs, slept for days on end, and woke up bearing new abilities. She held no grand hopes for immense power. She only wished her loyal dog would grow stronger and live a longer life. Ping'an spread her white lab coat across the cold floor and carefully lifted Xiaohei onto it, unwilling to let it catch a chill. Without a phone to pass the time, she sorted her spatial storage with her consciousness. She lined up storage racks with a 1-meter gap between each row for easy access to supplies. Her stockpile was so vast that only a dozen racks filled up quickly. She organized all goods by category. Every variety of rice was stacked on one rack, with excess rice moving to the next shelf. This formed a dedicated rice section. She sorted water, beverages, meat, seafood, vegetables, fruit, canned goods, snacks, medicine, seeds, knives, clothing, shoes, toiletries, skincare products, feminine hygiene supplies, paper towels, books, pet supplies, and kitchenware in the same orderly fashion. Infrequently used items like toolkits and fishing gear were grouped together. Huge stockpiles of coal, briquettes, and firewood were piled side by side. Water purification tablets, umbrellas, and fire-starting tools each had their own designated spots. All weapons were placed on the outermost racks, ready to grab at a moment's notice if danger struck. Every tricycle's cart held bicycles and 2-wheeled scooters to save storage space. Gasoline, diesel fuel, and vehicles were grouped together, lamps, power banks, and charging cables set near the front for quick retrieval. Pinyin had only bought 15 generators and 15 solar panels each. They carried a steep price tag, and with proper maintenance, each unit would last for years. More than enough to sustain her needs long-term. Staring at her overflowing, meticulously arranged storage space, Pinyin swelled with deep satisfaction. These supplies were her most precious treasures, the foundation of her survival and her lifeline in times of crisis. A dull, stabbing pain suddenly throbbed in her skull. The pain was accompanied by a high-pitched ringing in her ears. Her limbs went weak, and she slumped onto the sofa. She'd overtaxed her mental energy sorting the storage. Thankfully, she hadn't fully blacked out. Glancing at the still unconscious Xiaohei, she lacked the strength to drag herself to bed. She pulled a blanket from her spatial ring, curled up on the sofa, and slipped into a deep sleep. She lost track of time. When she stirred again, the house was shrouded in complete darkness. Pinyin lay motionless on the sofa, her mind still foggy, and closed her eyes once more to rest. She rested for another 30 minutes. After regaining her bearings, she summoned a solar lamp from her storage to light the room. A massive dark shape loomed over her, staring silently. She had no idea how long it had been watching. Pinyin screamed, hurling the lamp at the shadow. It clattered across the floor, flickering erratically as she instantly pulled a wood-chopping axe from her storage and held it defensively to her chest. Every muscle tensed as she eyed the mysterious silhouette. Inside Xiaohei's body, surging new power pulsed through its veins, and its mind grew sharper. Concepts it had never understood before now clicked into place. Half an hour prior, it had watched its owner wake, ready to nudge her hand for pets, only to see her close her eyes again. Xiaohei groomed its fur thoughtfully. It remembered how, back home, it would bark furiously to scare off strangers. The pup did this to protect the house at night while its owner slept. Each time it barked, Pinyin would hush it, warning that constant noise would annoy the neighbors and risk forcing them to rehome the dog. Back then, it hadn't grasped the meaning of her words, yet it had stood guard dutifully anyway. Chasing away unfamiliar humans was a dog's sacred duty. When it saw its owner's eyes shut, it knew not to disturb her rest. So it sat quietly on the floor, waiting for her to wake and marvel at its powerful new form. It never expected her to hurl a glowing lamp at it. The puppy's heart sank with hurt confusion. Woof woof woof. Why did you throw that at me, owner? It yelped in distress. Pinyin squinted through the dim light. Xiaohei. Woof. That's me, the dog replied, puffing out its chest with quiet pride. Pinyin pulled out a heavy-duty flashlight, one advertised to light an entire residential complex as bright as daylight. The room blazed with instant brightness. Xiaohei. Woof. Pinyin stared in awe at the creature standing before her. Her tiny pup had transformed into a massive black wolf-like hound. Thick, defined muscles bulged along all 4 legs. Its head had grown twice its original size. Its small paws now giant padded claws that thudded against the floor, and its tail whipped so fast it cut through the air. Only its eyes remained the same, clear, innocent, and sweetly dim-witted. There was no mistaking this was her beloved dog. Good heavens. Even a flawed, failed pet evolution pill was unbelievably potent. Pinyin gazed at Xiaohei, whose shoulder now reached her waist, overcome with amazement. Her original puppy had been a medium-sized breed, barely knee-high and weighing just 35 pounds. She'd never imagined the flawed pill could spur such dramatic growth. She resolved to test the pill's transformative effects immediately. Sit and shake hands, she ordered, holding out her palm to demonstrate the gesture. Xiaohei copied her without hesitation, lifting one massive front paw and tilting its head to study her. Its clear pupils reflected Pingin's silhouette. This was its whole world. Pingin's heart melted. It was so cute and clever, mastering the trick on the very first try. Good boy, perfect pup. She praised it warmly, then gave more commands one after another. Jump like me, yes, that's it. Spin in a circle. Roll over. Lie flat on the floor. Bark. Xiaohei followed every single instruction flawlessly. Before taking the pill, Xiaohei had only ever cared about eating, playing, and napping. Pingin had spent countless afternoons bribing it with treats to learn simple tricks, eventually giving up entirely. She loved her dog just as it was, regardless of training ability. Now its comprehension had skyrocketed, grasping every order after a single demonstration. Walk over there, attack that dining table, Pingin gestured toward the wooden table nearby. Xiaohei padded forward, halted beside the furniture, and lashed out with a lightning-fast paw strike. A deafening crack echoed as the solid wooden table leg snapped clean off under its blow. Bite the tabletop, Pingin commanded next. Xiaohei sank its jaws into the wood and tore off a huge chunk of the 8-centimeter thick tabletop in one crunch. Swipe the other 3 legs with your tail. The hound complied without pause. Pingin stared at the devastating strength before her, bubbling over with wild joy. A flawed evolution pill had doubled her dog's size, boosted its intelligence to instantly understand human speech, and filled its frame with terrifying, raw power. She could only wonder what a perfected version would accomplish. Turning Xiaohei into an unbeatable battlehound, no doubt. Pingin burst into laughter, some of her deepest, quiet fears easing away. Dogs with no health issues rarely live past 20 years. The thought of losing Xiaohei one day had haunted her, a grief so heavy it made her chest ache. Now that her pup was so robust and powerful, its lifespan was surely extended, though she had no way to measure exactly how much longer it would live. My wonderful, good boy. Pingin raised her hand to stroke its enlarged head. Xiaohei's perked ears flopped sideways into soft airplane ears. They were perfectly positioned for gentle pets. This loyal pup lived only to comfort its owner. Pingin chuckled softly. If she'd encountered this enormous hound on the street before knowing its true identity, she would have fled immediately. One bite would leave her no chance to escape. Still, she preferred its original small form. This towering new shape would undoubtedly scare her half-asleep in the dark of night. Xiaohei baby, can you shift back to your original size? Human-like thought flickered across the dog's dark eyes. After 30 seconds of quiet contemplation, it shrank back down. It returned to its familiar tiny puppy form right before Pingin's eyes. Wow, it actually works. Shift back to your big form again for me. Xiaohei bloomed once more into the towering, panther-like hound. You're absolutely amazing. Pingin showered it with praise, scratching its head affectionately. Next, she tapped the claim button for the pet satchel. A palm-sized red pouch embroidered with cloud patterns materialized, with 2 drawstrings tied at its center to open and seal the bag. Recalling how she'd bonded items to her spatial storage before, Pingin took a small knife and pricked the tip of her finger. She squeezed her fingertip gently, just as one would for a blood glucose test, until a single bead of crimson blood welled to the surface. She quickly dabbed the blood onto the satchel, not wanting to prick herself a second time. The pouch erupted in soft glowing light. Gaining a faint spiritual aura to signal their bond was complete. Pingin couldn't wait to test its function, and used her consciousness to pull Xiaohei inside. The dog dissolved into a wisp of black smoke, and was sucked fully into the satchel. After a short wait, she released it back. She brought him back into the room with a single thought. Baby, is there enough space inside? How do you feel? Does your body ache at all? Xiaohei couldn't process 3 questions at once, so it answered the simplest one first. Woof woof. It's just as roomy as my old kennel. Pingin couldn't quite parse the full meaning of its barked reply. Clearly they would need more time to grow accustomed to cross-species communication. She tapped the final special item listed on the glowing panel, the magic trash can. A 30-liter uncovered green public waste bin appeared before her, identical to the roadside trash receptacles from her old world. Her gaze drifted across the room, landing on the broken table leg littering the floor. Pingin stepped forward, picked up the splintered wood, and tossed it into the bin. Before the debris even touched the bottom, it vanished completely. Incredible, Pingin murmured in awe. If this invention had existed in her old world, its creator would have won a Nobel Prize without question. It solved humanity's greatest environmental crisis: safe, zero-harm waste disposal, a breakthrough that would benefit every person on the planet. She'd originally planned to bury all trash underground to decompose naturally, as there were no garbage collection trucks in this strange new world. Now, with her magical trash can, endless piles of waste were no longer a worry. Simply toss everything inside to erase it entirely. Pinyin laughed aloud. This wasn't a brutal transmigration, it was a dream retirement. No mandatory work, a fully furnished house gifted to her, and unlimited stockpiles of every supply needed for daily life. She'd skipped 30 years of tedious labor in an instant. 30 days of daily sign and rewards still waited ahead. She buzzed with excitement to see what miraculous items she'd unlock next. 30 days, 90 unique special treasures total. The thrill of opening each blind box reward filled her with pure delight and anticipation. Pinyin walked to the living room window and peered outside. The sky remained pitch black. She had no way to tell the hour. Though she'd stockpiled wristwatches, she had no reference for this world's time cycle to set them correctly. She decided to sleep a while longer until dawn. The sofa was far less comfortable than her bed, so she brought Xiaohei up to the second floor. She still felt uneasy living alone in an unfamiliar realm, and having her loyal dog sleep beside her would calm her nerves after dark. She owned countless blankets, so she pulled a 4-jean cotton comforter from storage. She shaped it into a soft dog bed beside her mattress. Xiaohei rolled ecstatically across the folded fabric, tongue lolling from its mouth in a wide grin. To sleep in the same room as its owner, this was the happiest pup alive. Pinyin could easily guess its joyful thoughts, and a warm smile tugged at her lips. She fetched a plastic basin and filled it halfway with clean drinking water. With limited facilities, cold water would have to suffice for quick washing. Pinyin scrubbed her hands thoroughly first, then reused the basin water to wash her feet. Once finished, she kicked the basin against the wall out of the way. She climbed into bed and sank into the blankets with a contented sigh. She resolved that tomorrow would be different, no more surviving on cold food and lukewarm water like a wild person, as she had the past 2 days. Pinyin glanced down at her puppy curled neatly beside the mattress, watching her with wide, hopeful eyes. She let out a soft laugh. Rest now. If you like it, you can sleep with me every night from now on. She switched off her flashlight and drifted into deep sleep. The next morning, Pinyin woke to quiet whimpering noises. Xiaohei needed to relieve itself and could no longer hold it in. Her body reacted faster than her mind. She shot upright in bed in an instant. The room was still shrouded in shadow. Pinyin strode to the window and ripped back the heavy blackout curtains. Blinding sunlight flooded the space, and she raised a hand to shield her eyes. Her vision struggling to adjust after hours of darkness. Once her sight cleared, she dressed quickly without tidying the room and unlocked the sturdy courtyard gate. Xiaohei bolted outside at once, finding a spot to relieve itself. It stood there for a full 2 minutes before finishing. Now unburdened, the puppy was brimming with energy. It raced back and forth across the yard, kicking up clouds of dust as it ran free without a leash for the first time. The courtyard held no hidden dangers, and she had no urgent tasks to complete, so Pinyin sat on the doorstep. She watched Xiaohei play for half an hour before calling it back inside. She latched the heavy, secure front gate and headed for the washroom. She pulled toothbrushes, toothpaste, a rinsing cup, shampoo, and body wash from her storage, lining all toiletries neatly on the counter. This marked her 3rd day in the new world. The prior 2 days she'd lived in disarray, neglecting proper hygiene. Tonight she planned to draw a full hot bath and freshen up thoroughly. She filled a bucket with bottled mineral water to brush her teeth and wash her face. After finishing her morning routine, Pinyin stared at the bucket of fresh water. While mineral water was fine for cooking, bathing, and washing up, using it for laundry would be far too wasteful. She resolved to travel to the nearby river in a few days to collect reserve water for chores. Her stomach rumbled after 2 full days of cold meals, a dull cold ache settling in her gut that threatened to trigger stomach trouble if she continued the habit. She walked into the spacious, bright kitchen she'd always dreamed of owning. Pinyin brought out a large earthen water vat. She filled it to the brim with mineral water, sealing it tight with its matching lid. She washed a clay soup pot and 2 large iron woks resting on the stove. She retrieved a sack of millet, scooped several handfuls of golden grain, rinsed them clean, and poured them into the soup pot. She stowed the leftover millet back in storage. Next, she pulled out several sweet potatoes, scrubbed them, peeled their skins, and chopped them into chunky wedges to add to the pot. She tossed in a handful of red dates, topped everything with an appropriate amount of water, and covered the pot with its lid. She lit the stove to simmer the congee. The 2 iron woks were not left idle. Pingin filled them with water to boil for her evening bath and hair wash. It took more than a dozen ladles to fill both woks to the rim. Pingin sat beside the stove to tend the fire. She tossed dried corn cobs into the flames every few minutes to keep the heat steady. 30 minutes later, thick steam billowed from the cookware, accompanied by the gentle bubbling of boiling water inside both woks. Pingin fetched her storage vat, ladled the hot-boiled water into it, and sealed it away in her spatial ring. The remaining hot water she poured into insulated thermoses. A warm, sweet aroma filled the kitchen. Pingin lifted the soup pot lid and stirred the contents with a spoon, revealing a thick, creamy millet and sweet potato congee fully cooked and ready to eat. She stirred in a small amount of white granulated sugar until evenly mixed. Pingin fetched a beautiful porcelain bowl and spoon from the side cabinet, washed them clean, and poured the porridge into the bowl. There was too much left over to finish, so Pingin placed the clay pot directly on the spatial storage shelf. No matter when she took it out later, the contents would stay steaming hot. She pulled out a small packet of pickled mustard tuber, alternating bites of the salty vegetable and warm porridge. A gentle warmth spread through her stomach, and the fear and confusion that had weighed on her these past 2 days slowly melted away with each mouthful of hot food. After eating, she tidied up the kitchen, washed all the tableware, and put them back into the cabinet. Pingin walked to the living room and sat down on the sofa to aid digestion, while Xiaohei sprawled out on the floor at her feet like a fluffy dog pancake. It was time for the thrilling daily mystery box draw. Pingin tapped the system's daily check-in button. Ding! Congratulations on receiving Ghost Thorn Seed ×1, Moonlight Puff Seed ×30, Unidentified Pet Egg ×1. Ghost Thorn, once fully grown, this plant stands unrivaled among all flora. Right now, it is merely an unsprouted seed. Once planted successfully, it will become an utterly loyal and formidable guardian. Moonlight Puff, a luminous plant that illuminates a 5-meter radius around it, while effectively repelling all insects in the vicinity. Unidentified Pet Egg, a poor egg that accidentally tumbled down from a higher realm. I've hit the jackpot! Pingin exclaimed excitedly, practically squealing with delight. Her house was impenetrable, yet she could not keep watch 24 hours a day. If wild beasts wandered in while she slept, she would be in grave danger. With the ghost thorn planted right by the front gate, it would guard the home once mature. This filled her with a strong sense of safety. As for the moonlight puffs, her yard was pitch black at night. She could plant one every 5 meters across the yard, serving as both lighting and insect repellent. She would also place one in her bedroom to act as a soft nightlight and natural bug repellent. Last came the unidentified pet egg. The system's vague description made her wonder, could there be worlds beyond humanity's own, higher dimensional realms? She shook the thought away. She barely understood the world she was trapped in now. Speculating about other planes was nothing but a fantasy. If fate allowed, she would learn the truth someday. I don't know what creature will hatch from this egg, but whatever it is, it can help guard the house too, Pingin thought happily. Once the ghost thorn matured, the moonlight puffs bloomed, the mystery egg hatched, and Xiaohei stayed by her side. Her little home would be full of life. The system had not explained how to plant the seeds, so Pingin decided to use ordinary gardening methods. She stood and walked to the front gate, picking a spot roughly 1 meter away from the door. She sprinkled water evenly over the soil. Once the moisture seeped fully into the ground, she took a shovel. She dug a small hole, carefully set the seed inside, then sprinkled a little more water on top. My dear ghost thorn, I'll come water you and talk to you every day. Please grow tall and strong quickly. She covered the hole with dirt and marked the spot clearly, making sure never to step there. She could not risk crushing the fragile seedling. A thought struck her, and she called out to Xiaohei. Xiaohei, come here. See this patch of earth? Pingin pointed down. No running or playing here, and don't dig at the dirt with your paws. Do you understand? Woof woof woof. The dog barked to signal its comprehension. Seeing that Xiaohei had gotten the message, Pingin stroked its head. Good boy. I'll cook you something tasty at noon. She closed the front gate and returned to the yard, repeating the same planting process for 5 moonlight puff seeds around the main house. Once again telling Xiaohei not to trample or dig up the soil. She stored the remaining seeds for later, planning to wait and see how these 5 fared first. There was only one ghost thorn seed, leaving no room for mistakes. By the time she finished all the planting, noon had arrived. The high sun blazed harshly overhead. Oh! Ping'an clapped her hands, suddenly remembering something important. She pulled all her solar panels and solar lamps out of her spatial storage and laid them out across the spacious yard. There was more than enough room for all of them. I can't waste this bright sunshine. The lamps are low on power. They'll shine bright tonight after charging, and the panels will stay stored as spares. Once she finished setting everything out, her stomach rumbled loudly. She had only eaten a bowl of millet porridge that morning, and it had long since digested. Ping'an headed to the washroom to wash her hands, brainstorming what to make for lunch. An idea popped into her head: dry pot duck. She walked to the kitchen and pulled all her favorite ingredients out of storage, arranging them across the countertop. First, she chopped the duck into uniform chunks. She rinsed them 3 to 4 times until clean, then set them in a basin. Next, she prepped the side dishes. She peeled potatoes, sliced them thick, then cut the slices into finger-width strips. Ginger, garlic, and green onions were chopped into chunks. Bean sprouts were rinsed and placed on a plate. All side ingredients were ready. Ping'an sat on the small stool by the stove and lit the fire. She poured an appropriate amount of water into the pot and added the duck chunks to blanch. Ginger, garlic, and green onion went in alongside a splash of cooking wine to cut the gamey odor. The water soon came to a boil. Since she was making dry pot duck, she let the duck simmer longer. Once blanched, she fished the meat out with a strainer and rinsed off all the bloody foam with clean water. She heated the pot and poured in rapeseed oil. When the oil was hot, she deep-fried the potato strips and duck chunks one after another until golden and crisp, then lifted them out to drain excess oil. Leaving a thin layer of oil at the bottom of the pot, she tossed in Sichuan peppercorns, ginger, garlic, dried chili peppers, and broad bean paste. She stir-fried them until fragrant. She added the duck, potatoes, and bean sprouts next. She seasoned with measured salt, chicken bouillon, monosodium glutamate, white pepper, and white sesame seeds, tossing everything evenly. A rich, bold aroma filled the kitchen, and she plated the dish quickly. The dry pot duck was scorching hot straight off the heat, so Ping'an set it aside to cool slightly while she prepared a cold side dish. She smashed a cucumber, peeled and cut preserved eggs, and placed them on a plate. In a separate bowl, she mixed salt, chicken bouillon, and sugar. She added light soy sauce, black vinegar, and chili oil, stirring until the universal dipping sauce was smooth. She poured the sauce over the cucumber and preserved eggs and tossed them together. Her cold appetizer was complete. By the time the cold dish was ready, the dry pot duck had cooled enough. It was cool enough to eat. Ping'an carried both plates to the living room table and picked up a potato strip. It glistened appealingly under the light. She took a bite immediately. The fried potato was crisp on the outside and tender within, emitting a satisfying crunch with every chew. The bite was layered with savory, spicy, and subtle sweet flavors that burst across her tongue. The duck skin was perfectly crispy. Tearing it open revealed tender meat that grew richer with each chew, stoking her appetite instantly. She followed each mouthful of duck and potato with crisp, juicy cucumber. This refreshed her palate and cut through the richness of the meat. Ping'an alternated bites of the spicy dry pot duck and cool preserved egg cucumber, thoroughly enjoying her meal. After finishing eating, she retrieved a bottle of carbonated soda from her storage. Tiny, frothy bubbles burst across her tongue. She sighed in pure bliss. The delicious scent made Xiaohe whine desperately beside her, pawing repeatedly at her pant leg. Woof 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 woof. It smells amazing, master. Give me a bite. I can't stand it anymore. Ha ha, don't worry, Xiaohe. I'll never let you go hungry. Xiaohe had grown much larger, and its appetite had grown along with its size. Ping'an poured all the leftover dry pot duck into the dog bowl and refilled its water bowl to the brim. Go ahead and eat, she told it. Woof. Xiaohe wagged its tail wildly. The dog shoved its muzzle into the bowl. It expertly avoided all the chili peppers with every bite, scooping up mouthfuls of duck, bean sprouts, and potato strips. The bowl was empty in minutes. The heavy seasoning left the dog thirsty, and it lapped at the water vigorously. He splashed half the liquid onto the floor as it drank. Ping'an was long used to this mess, so she refilled the bowl once more for Xiaohe. Human and dog both full and satisfied, Ping'an returned to the kitchen, scrubbed all pots and tableware clean. She put them away and tidied the space. She then curled up comfortably on the living room sofa to digest her food. Xiaohei copied her, curling up at her feet and falling asleep with soft snores moments later. Watching the dog sleep soundly made Ping drowsy too. She yawned, kicked off her shoes, and stretched out on the sofa. Before long, she drifted into a deep sleep. She had no idea how long she'd slept when she slowly stirred awake. Though still tired, she forced herself up. Napping too late in the afternoon would keep her awake all night. Ping walked to the restroom to relieve herself, splashed cold water on her face, combed her loose hair, and tied it into a low ponytail. She returned to the living room and unlocked the front door. Xiaohei woke at once and trotted out to the gate. Ping opened the courtyard's outer fence gate. It was time for their walk. Xiaohei had grown smarter lately, never wandering far even without a leash. Ping dragged a stool to the gate and sat watching it play. Her dog was endlessly adorable, no matter how long she stared. Before adopting Xiaohei, Ping days had been plain and unremarkable. After bringing the dog home, her heart overflowed with care. She would skimp on her own meals before letting the puppy go without. Every night when she got up to use the restroom, she would stop to check on Xiaohei, admiring its peaceful sleeping face. After sitting for a while, Ping realized she could not afford to waste time. She had little ability to defend herself, and her body remained weak and frail. She resolved to write a personalized training schedule tailored to her needs. After thinking it over carefully, she grabbed paper and a pen and jotted down the list. 1. Practice Bajuanjin 3 times daily, morning, noon, and night, to strengthen her weak body. 2. Jump rope 1,000 times every day. Complete 50 sit-ups and 50 push-ups daily, gradually increasing the count to 300 as her stamina improves. 4. Go on weighted walking training. 5. Practice swinging a blade 200 times per day. 6. Train archery and crossbow marksmanship regularly. 7. Hold a daily plank to build core strength. Knowledge is power. Read for 1 hour before bed each night. 9. Avoid staying up late. Aim to sleep before 11 o'clock. She could only judge the time by daylight for now, with no clock available. These were all the tasks she could think of for the moment. She would add more later as new ideas came to her. Completing all this training would take at least 4 hours each day. She had hoped to slack off for a little longer, but it was clear she needed to build her strength as soon as possible to stay safe. Without combat ability, she had no means to protect herself. Time had passed quickly, and Xiaohei had finished playing and relieved itself. Ping hated to waste a single minute, so she called the dog back inside, locked both gates securely, and latched them tight. The sun dipped low toward the horizon, so she gathered all the solar panels and lamps from the yard and stored them back in her spatial storage. Back in the dim living room, she set up several charged solar lamps across the space, by the living room, kitchen, staircase, and second floor. The fully charged bulbs burned bright, chasing away all shadows in an instant. Ping sat on the sofa, resting her chin in her hand as she pondered. She had forgotten to buy punching bags, sewing thread, and other supplies during her shopping trips. How could she fashion makeshift versions herself? A sudden flash of inspiration made her slap her thigh hard. I've got it. She had stocked up on numerous cylindrical pillows filled with buckwheat husks and cassia seeds, originally intended to soothe her nerves and improve sleep. Now they would serve a new purpose. Ping pulled 4 pillows out of storage, emptied their herbal filling, and stowed the husks away. She poured soybeans into the empty pillowcases, tied the openings shut with elastic bands, then secured the sacks to both calves with thick rope. Strapping the weights to her arms proved far trickier. She used her teeth to help tie the knots, struggling until her arms ached to finish fastening them. Haha, I'm such a clever thinker, Ping praised herself, proud of her quick solution. She took a few test steps and her arms and legs felt as though they were filled with lead. Her legs could bear the weight somewhat comfortably, but her arms burned with strain instantly. Ping resolved to wear these homemade weights every day. She would only untie the arm sacks during meals and cooking. For all other hours, even while sleeping, she would keep them fastened. Without a yoga mat, she spread a clean bedsheet over an empty patch of floor in the living room and lay down atop it. Xiaohei, she gestured toward her legs, grow larger and hold my legs down for me. At her command, Xiaohei's body swelled rapidly, transforming into a powerfully built hound. It stretched out across her legs exactly as Ping had asked, pinning them firmly to the sheet. Ping'an laced her fingers behind her head and braced herself to start her first set of sit-ups with full determination. Yet, after only 15 repetitions, she collapsed flat on the ground, unable to lift her upper body an inch further. Her arms throbbed fiercely, drained of all strength. The urge to quit washed over her, but she reminded herself that only a strong, healthy body could let her survive long-term. She rested for several minutes, then tried again, pausing to recover between sets. She repeated the cycle until she finished all 50 sit-ups, drenched in sweat and gasping. Huff, huff, this is exhausting, Ping'an groaned out loud. Her muscles would surely ache for days before her body adjusted to the strain. Once she caught her breath, she moved on to push-ups. As a child, she had played soccer in her village. The losing team was always punished with push-ups, so she knew the exercise well. After 15 push-ups, her hands and legs trembled uncontrollably, and she could barely push her body up from the floor. Just like with the sit-ups, she rested when exhausted and resumed once recovered. She pushed through the full set through sheer willpower. She lay flat on the floor afterward, drained and listless. Xiaohei patted over and nudged her cheek with its muzzle. Shoo, go play somewhere else. Ping'an waved the dog away, then lectured it gently. I know you like me, but don't touch my face or mouth with your muzzle. There are lots of germs there. Xiaohei tilted its head in confusion. It had simply never seen its master lie flat on the ground before and was curious. By the time she recovered enough to stand, night had fully fallen outside the windows. Ping'an was ravenous and worn out. She untied the weighted sacks from her arms and trudged slowly toward the kitchen. Her muscles were stiff and sore as if she were a zombie. Her stomach roared with hunger, craving meat above all else. Too fatigued to tend a wood-fired stove for hours, she pulled an electric rice cooker out of storage and washed it clean. Then set up her solar panels nearby to power it. She planned to make sausage clay pot rice for dinner. Ping'an retrieved 2 sausages, sliced them diagonally into rounds, rinsed them, and set them aside to drain. She diced potatoes and shiitake mushrooms, then washed fresh peas. She rinsed the rice twice and poured it into the cooker, adding 2 spoons of light soy sauce and 1 spoon of oyster sauce. She added half a spoon of dark soy sauce, half a spoon of salt, and half a spoon of white sugar. She stirred the seasonings thoroughly into the rice to ensure even flavor distribution. She laid the sausages, mushrooms, potatoes, and peas across the rice surface, poured in the correct amount of water. She drizzled a little sesame oil and closed the lid, setting the cooker to its 40-minute rice cooking mode. With dinner underway, Ping'an returned to the sofa to rest for a while. Since she had no jump rope, she found a length of hemp rope cut to match her height. She carried it into the lit yard and began jumping. When straight jumps tired her legs, she switched to running jumps. Midway through, she noticed she had wandered far from the gate without realizing it, so she simply jogged around the yard while skipping rope. As a child, she had excelled at jump rope games, running jumps, cross jumps, single forward and backward jumps, partner jumps, and group triple jumps. She always won every contest. Recalling those old days cast a faint shadow over her expression. Those were some of her only happy memories. Most of her childhood had been filled with cold stares and unkind treatment from others. But all that's behind me now. I've turned to a brand new chapter of life, she murmured. She cupped her hands around her mouth and whispered. She whispered toward the wilderness beyond the fence, I will be happy, and I will live a wonderful life. She dared not shout loudly, fearing the noise would draw wild beasts. Her quiet declaration made her laugh at herself afterward. Ha ha, big words spoken in a tiny whisper, what a timid way to cheer myself on. Ping'an lost track of how many jumps she completed, eventually letting loose and showing off all her old jump rope tricks to pass the time. Back inside the living room, she filled a glass. She filled it 1/3 full with boiling water and 2/3 with cool water, chugging the entire glass in one go. She had been parched after all that exercise. She collapsed onto the sofa to rest and wait for dinner to finish. Moments later, a series of beeps echoed. The sausage clay pot rice was ready. Ping'an walked to the kitchen and lifted the lid, greeted by a rich, inviting aroma. She filled a large bowl with rice, grabbed a spoon, and carried it to the living room to eat. She scooped up a spoonful and took a big bite. The natural fragrance of rice blended with the savory oil from the sausages, tender shiitake mushrooms, and soft peas, creating a perfect, flavorful mouthful. It's delicious, absolutely wonderful, she sighed happily. She finished a full bowl, drank a glass of water, and still felt hungry. She headed back to the kitchen for a small second serving. She could not eat too much late at night, or she would suffer indigestion and lose sleep. The leftover rice had cooled enough, so Ping'an carried the entire rice cooker pot to the living room and poured all the remaining food. She poured it into Xiaohei's bowl, topping it off with fresh water. Xiaohei was overjoyed, tucking into its hearty meal. After eating, Ping'an rested for a short while before heading back to the kitchen to scrub the pot and bowls, cleaning the entire cooking space thoroughly. She had not bathed in 3 days, and her workout had left her covered in sweat. Her clothes carried a faint, unpleasant odor. Ping'an walked to the washroom, fetched a plastic basin, and mixed hot and cold water until the temperature was comfortable. Then washed her hair. She rinsed 4 times before wrapping her damp hair in an absorbent hair turban. She pulled out a large soaking tub, filled it with warm water, and sank into the tub. The hot water wrapped around her body, bringing immense comfort. Unfortunately, she had run out of hot water, so she only quickly lathered herself with body wash before rinsing off. She dried her skin, changed into soft pajamas, and returned to the living room. Ping'an plugged a hair dryer into her solar power setup and dried her hair completely. She then hand-washed her undergarments and hung them on the clotheslines strung across her bedroom balcony. Night had fully fallen, and clouds covered the moon, plunging the outdoors into total darkness. She dared not unlock the gate to let Xiaohei relieve itself outside, so the dog did its business within the large open courtyard. Luckily, the open space let any odors disperse quickly on the breeze. She locked all doors tight and walked into the first bedroom. Sitting at the desk, she pulled a dark green hardcover journal out of storage. She had been trapped in this world for 3 days now, and without writing things down, she would easily forget her daily activities and long-term plans. Flipping open her notebook, she began to write, 3rd day of the new calendar, 16th day of the lunar 6th month, sunny weather. This marks the 3rd day since I arrived in this new world. I was struck on the head by an object thrown by a patient, and when I woke up again, I was in an unfamiliar place. I'd been on the verge of a good life, yet unforeseen disaster dragged me away. 20 years of hard work, all reduced to nothing. I'm terrified. Stranded alone in remote mountains with nothing to my name, I could easily get eaten by wild beasts and end up with no proper burial. I resent how unjust fate is. Why do kind people never get good fortune, while those who bring harm live long, unpunished lives? I never once committed wrongdoing in my life. I lost my father young, then my mother while still a teenager. My parents never hurt a soul either, yet good people still suffer. I shouted and cursed my anger into the air, only to suddenly bind with a system shock. I can sign in each day to receive special items too. Thankfully, my house and savings from my original world converted into system points. I've bought enough food and supplies to last multiple lifetimes, plus a sprawling courtyard home I've always dreamed of. The building is sturdy enough to fend off any dangers. I thought my dog Blackie would be left behind in my old life, but the system sent him straight back. He's my only family, and I can't bear to lose him. Speaking of rewards, I've earned countless special items from daily check-ins. The most important ones are ghost thorn seeds and an unidentified egg. Once the ghost thorns grow fully, I'll never live in constant fear again. Their combat power is extraordinary, and a single vine can shield the entire courtyard. As for the mysterious egg, I have no idea what will hatch from it, but it's bound to be something remarkable. Every reward from sign-ins and daily tasks has proven useful so far. I've also drawn up a fitness training plan, determined to strengthen my body so I can protect myself and live out the rest of my days peacefully in this foreign realm. Training is exhausting though. There were multiple moments I wanted to quit, yet I pushed through every time. Hehe, I'm really amazing, kudos to myself. No nosy, unpleasant relatives to deal with, no need to scrimp and save for a house, no tedious office work, endless supplies of food. This time, I'll live a brand new life and accomplish every dream I once put off. I'm going to nurture and care for the version of myself I never got to be before. I didn't realize I'd written so much. My arm aches terribly. It's far too late. I should head to bed. Oh, I just remembered the unknown egg hasn't been prepared yet. Tomorrow, I'll build a proper nest for it to speed up its hatching. I won't strap on weight sandbags tonight, or any other nights while I sleep. Restful sleep will give me the energy to train hard each morning. That's all for today. I'm worn out. Time to sleep. Good night, may I stay safe and all things go well for me. After finishing the journal entry covering these 3 days, Ping'an gently closed her notebook and pen, then crawled under her quilt. It felt wonderfully cozy. She hadn't lain down more than a few minutes when the urge to use the restroom hit. She dragged herself upright with a frown. Sliding on her slippers, she headed to the bathroom to relieve herself. Once fully settled again, Ping'an slipped back under the covers. She found a comfortable position. Drained from the day's toil, she fell asleep almost instantly. Day 4 since crossing into the remote mountains, and the second day of Ping and self-designed physical training. She'd slept soundly through the night, free of noisy distractions, yet her body felt anything but rested. Her frame, long deprived of sunlight and neglected from consistent exercise, was now racked with severe delayed onset muscle soreness after yesterday's intense workout. Her limbs moved stiffly and sluggishly. Every tendon felt as though it had been stretched raw. Even the tiniest twist of her core brought a dull ache. Her shoulders and arms felt weighted when lifting, her legs rigid and tingly. And every small roll over in bed sent a throbbing stretch of soreness rippling across her body. These aches were tangible proof her body was being forced to grow stronger, yet the sensation was utterly miserable. In that moment, Ping'an ached for a soothing full-body massage to melt away her exhaustion and stiffness. Yet the wish was futile. Trapped in this desolate land teeming with unknown threats, she could only rely on herself. Only a strong body would let her survive long-term in this alien world. So despite the agony, she had no intention of abandoning her training routine. Ping'an took a deep breath, refusing to slack off, and slowly pushed herself upright to step out of bed. She pulled back the heavy blackout curtains and sheer white gauze drapes, revealing a vivid mountain dawn unfolding before her eyes. Thin morning mist curled through the rolling green peaks, washed over by soft, clear daylight. Pale cyan fog wound around layered dark mountain ridges, blurring stretches of forest into distant hazy silhouettes. Distant hills stood quiet, while nearby trees glistened fresh and vibrant. Compared to her old cramped city rental, perpetually dim and sunless, surrounded by towering concrete with barely a blade of green in sight, this place was a world apart. Here, natural light flowed warm and unconfined. Every glance stretched out over endless green mountains and vast woodland, easy on her eyes. It was dissolving years of pent-up melancholy trapped in her heart. The mountains lay silent except for faint, crisp birdsong drifting from distant trees. The tranquility cleared her mind, yet kept her sharply alert to her surroundings. It only strengthened her resolve to build up her physical strength. Dragging her stiff legs, Ping'an wandered into the spacious living room, steadied her breath, and began her routine. The first round of Bajuanjin flowed slow and gentle, lifting arms to stretch her shoulders, bending knees to lean forward. It gradually unwound tight, knotted muscle fibers and unblocked stagnant chi. Stagnant chi from overnight rest was released. The tension in her shoulders and spine softened little by little, yet the deep lactic acid soreness lingering in her limbs refused to fade. Patient and unrushed, she completed a second full set. After 2 sessions of Bajuanjin, chi circulated freely throughout her frame. The grogginess of dawn and bodily stiffness vanished entirely. Though post-workout soreness lingered, it no longer restricted her movement, leaving her loose and limber. She headed to the washroom for a quick wash, then unlocked the courtyard gate to let Blackie run outside and relieve himself. Around 10 minutes later, Ping'an called the dog back and latched the gate shut. After washing her hands, she stepped into her favorite bright, roomy kitchen. Yesterday, she'd forgotten to wear an apron while cooking, and constant hand-washing left her sleeves soaked. Learning her lesson, she pulled a floral apron from storage. She pulled it from her spatial storage and tied it on. Ping'an grabbed a handful of dry pine needles to start the fire, tucking them into the stove's firebox before adding a few dry sticks. She struck a lighter, and tiny orange flames flared up among the pine needles, crackling softly. This crackling was a deeply calming sound. Once the flame stabilized, she added thick, slow-burning logs. Fire licked up through the gaps between timber, casting a warm glow across the stove. Soon the pot bases heated through, and the entire cottage filled with the dry, earthy aroma of burning firewood. She filled one pot to the brim with water, then repeated the process for a second ground stove. She planned to boil plenty of hot water to store and avoid running out when needed. So she retrieved solar panels and an electric rice cooker from her storage space and carried them out. She carried them out to the courtyard. She filled the cooker with water and plugged it into the panel setup. These solar panels charged fully under sunlight, incredibly practical for her needs. With that task finished, Ping'an set about preparing breakfast for the day. She scooped flour into a large bowl, adding water and stirring until the batter turned smooth and lump-free. She cracked 5 farm-fresh eggs into the mix, their golden yolk blending into the milky white batter. Then she chopped a handful of tender green chives and tossed them in. Instantly, a bright, fresh onion scent filled the air. A pinch of salt and chicken bouillon followed, then she stirred everything evenly once more. She stoked the stove fire, pulled out a flat pan and poured a thin layer of cooking oil across its surface. Once the oil heated up, she spooned a dollop of batter and spread it evenly over the pan. A soft sizzle echoed as the edges of the pancake bubbled up into pale golden crusts. The egg mixture set from the heat, and the batter swelled into round, plump flatbreads. She flipped each cake until both sides turned warm amber and crisp, edges curling slightly upward. A fragrant chive egg pancake was complete. The outer layer was crisp and toasted, the interior soft and fluffy, dotted with tiny flecks of emerald chives. Steam carried the rich aroma of egg balanced with bright green onion, instantly stoking her appetite. As each pancake finished cooking, Ping'an plated it and placed it on a shelf in her storage space, worried they'd lose their flavor sitting out in the open air. Once all 10 pancakes were done, she pulled out a jar of pickled vegetables. Dark brown radish strips mixed with bright red, minced chili peppers soaked in glossy, translucent brine, glistening under the light. Just the sight stirred hunger. Ping'an sat at the dining table, tore off a chunk. She bit down on the steaming pancake. The crisp crust crumbled at the lightest touch, the soft interior melting on her tongue, blending rich egg flavor with sharp, clean chive notes. Mild wheat sweetness spread across her palate. One bite of pancake, paired with a forkful of pickled radish. The crisp, tangy vegetables balanced the gentle warmth of the flatbread, sweet, sour, and lightly spicy flavors layering over each other for a complex, satisfying taste. Warm bread paired with fresh, crunchy pickles, simple home cooking that wrapped her in profound comfort. She ate 2 pancakes and finished a bowl of leftover millet congee from the previous day. Warmth slid down her throat to settle in her stomach, leaving a lingering savory sweetness on her tongue, peaceful and fulfilling. She stowed the remaining 8 chive egg pancakes on a storage shelf. Then she scrubbed her tableware and tidied the kitchen. By then, the water on the stove was at a rolling boil, bubbling thick clouds of steam. Ping'an first cut power to all the courtyard cookware, fetched large water vats and poured the boiled hot water into them. She poured them in one after another. She then extinguished the kitchen stove fire and ladled more hot water into the containers. She filled 3 full vats in total. If rationed carefully, the supply would last her at least a week. Once all chores wrapped up, Ping'an readied herself for her second day of physical training. She possessed no professional fitness knowledge, no coach to guide her, nor any formal training manuals. She only knew the most basic workout methods: jump rope to build stamina, planks to strengthen core. She also relied on sit-ups to tone abs, push-ups to train upper body strength, and weighted exercise to speed up rebuilding her weak physique. Even if her form was imperfect and techniques unrefined, consistent practice and gradual trial and error would surely make her body stronger. She strapped homemade weight sandbags firmly to her limbs, settled her mind, and began training. First came weighted jump rope. Yesterday, she'd foolishly attempted to blast through all sets nonstop, only for her cardiovascular system to fail quickly. Her breath came ragged and chaotic, heart hammering wildly. Her calves throbbed with fatigue, her feet tangling repeatedly in the rope. Today, she adjusted her rhythm, splitting the workout into short sets separated by brief rests. Steadying her breathing to complete the session slowly. Sweat soaked the strands of hair on her forehead, dripping down her jawline. Next were push-ups. Ping'an tensed her upper arms, braced her core, and flattened her spine, striving for proper form with every repetition. Compared to yesterday, she moved faster, her technique far smoother and more standard. Third came the sit-ups she needed to complete. When she first started, she'd pulled herself upward using only her neck, prioritizing quantity over quality. After several sets, her neck ached sharply while her abdominal muscles felt no burn at all. Today she took time to master the correct muscle engagement, deliberately contracting her core to lift. She contracted her core to lift her torso. A searing flood of soreness washed over her abs, making her grit her teeth against the strain. Last of all came the planks. Ping'an believed this exercise demanded immense lower back strength, so she saved it for the end. She saved it for the end of her routine. The sun climbed steadily toward midday, its rays growing blisteringly bright as noon drew near. After finishing her final plank set, her body went limp, and she collapsed heavily onto the bare dirt of the courtyard. Ping gasped for air, her chest rising and falling violently. Scorching air rushed back and forth down her throat, leaving it raw as though scraped by a blade. Her arms trembled with exhaustion, her core muscles throbbing weak and sore. Sweat drenched every inch of her clothes, streaming down her jawline to soak her neck, fabric clinging sticky against her skin. She spread her limbs limply on the ground, letting her ragged breathing calm as she stared upward at the sky above the mountains. She had never witnessed a sky so breathtakingly beautiful. It was a flawless, transparent cerulean blue, unmarred by a single cloud stain. Only thin wispy streaks drifted high above, edged bright white under sunlight. Blinding golden light spilled down through layered treetops, dappling the earth. The light dappled the earth with patchy shadows. Deep emerald mountain ranges framed the boundless bright blue overhead. Though the sunlight burned slightly warm, gazing out at that endless stretch of sky softened the tight exhaustion coiled deep in her bones. Back in school, she'd woken before dawn and slept far too late each night, never once catching sight of such vivid blue skies or brilliant sunshine. Her working years granted slightly more freedom. At minimum, she could glimpse the afternoon sun. But every day left her drained and overworked, viewing sunlight only as an annoying nuisance before rushing home on her electric scooter to sleep and recover energy. Every regular office worker understood sunlight came with a hidden cost. Ordinary people exhausted every ounce of effort just to survive. Buying cars and houses in the city forced everyone into that grueling grind. Her clumsy yet wholehearted morning training concluded, her frame saturated with sweat and aching all over. Yet her heart felt grounded and clear. Every rep marked progress, tangible proof she was growing stronger. After a quick stretch to rub out tight muscles, Ping sank onto the living room sofa and tapped the floating system interface to complete her daily sign-in. Ding! Sign-in successful. You have obtained Yellow Dream Pillow ×1, Savory Meat Bone ×1, Premium Fertilizer 5 kilograms ×1. Yellow Dream Pillow, a soft, comfortable pillow capable of crafting hyper-realistic vivid dreams. When resting on this pillow, it will generate unique personal dreams based on your deepest heartfelt desires. Savory Meat Bone, irresistible to all canines. No dog can resist its delicious aroma. Upon taking out the bone and making the sound ts ts ts, the targeted dog will be forced to drop to all fours and bark continuously for 10 full seconds. Premium Fertilizer 5 kilograms, used for nourishing plant growth. Any vegetation fertilized with this product will experience accelerated growth rates. Wow, this is fantastic. The system never fails to deliver exactly what I need. Ping bubbled over with excitement. Just yesterday, she'd been worrying ghost thorns and moonlight cattails would take ages to mature naturally. And today's sign-in rewarded her with high-grade fertilizer. With this, both plants would flourish in no time. The 10-pound sack would last her quite a while. Unable to wait a single second, Ping walked to the ghost thorn seeds planted beside the main gate. Ghost thorns shared a natural master bond trait. Once fully mature, their vines would actively strangle any intruder bearing hostile intent, forming an impenetrable living security barrier around her residence. Ping knelt down, gently loosening the soil around the seedling roots, carefully burying the premium fertilizer around the outer root zone. She covered it evenly with dirt and watered the patch lightly. Watching the water carry nutrients deep into the soil, her heart raced with anticipation. Soon she would possess this powerful defensive plant. Grow fast, my dear ghost thorns. Your weak master is counting on you. After tending to the courtyard's defensive ghost thorns, Ping wandered over to the plot-holding moonlight cattails, tempted to fertilize them as well. She hesitated and held back though. Their light-emitting and mosquito-repelling effects weren't urgently needed right now, so she let them grow at their natural pace. Ghost thorns guarded her home, making them far more critical. All the fertilizer was best reserved for them. Ping stored the remaining fertilizer in an empty section of her spatial storage for easy access whenever required. She took Blackie out for a quick walk, locked the courtyard gate, and headed back indoors to the ground floor. It was time to build a simple incubation nest for her mysterious egg. Successful egg incubation required a quiet, shaded, windproof, constant temperature, moisture-free environment. Using cardboard boxes, pure cotton cloth, dry cotton batting, and thin breathable fabric pulled from her storage space, Ping and Hand constructed a basic incubation nest entirely from scratch. Layers of cotton lined the bottom to retain warmth. Thick cloth wrapped the sides to block drafts. A dark fabric sheet covered the top to shut out light, and a narrow gap was left underneath for air circulation. Blocking wind did not mean sealing every opening tight. It protected the embryo from sudden temperature shifts and direct cold gusts. The small ventilation slit supplied oxygen and vented accumulated waste gases. The two needs did not conflict at all. Ping set the egg securely in the quietest, most sheltered corner of the room, shut every window without leaving a crack, and drew all curtains. This step plunged the space into complete darkness. Perfect, everything's set just right. Ping brushed dust off her palms and locked the room door shut, just in case Blackie wandered in and accidentally crushed the egg. What will hatch out of it? A snake? A tiger? Or something that can fly? She could only guess for the time being. Oh right, I still haven't tested the savory meat bone. She claimed the reward, and a fragrant bone larger than her palm materialized. Blackie caught sight of the tasty treat in his owner's hand, wagging his tail furiously as he trotted over, sitting upright on his hindquarters with perfectly neat posture. Ping shook the bone in her hand and made the TS calling sound. Instantly, Blackie lost control of his body, dropping flat to all four paws and barking nonstop. Woof 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 woof. Blackie panicked, confused. Why wouldn't his limbs obey his commands? He strained to stand, yet could not shift an inch, terror shining in his eyes. 10 seconds passed, and the invisible binding force lifted. Blackie scrambled back onto his feet at once. Woof woof. That scared me half to death. Tears welled up in the dog's wide, reddened eyes. Seeing how frightened Blackie had become, Ping quickly pulled out treats. She pulled out dog treats to soothe him. This bone holds remarkable power. If I ever face an enemy I cannot defeat, it could buy me 10 vital seconds to escape. Still, Ping hoped she would never have to rely on it. After witnessing the savory meat bone's strange effect, Ping curled up on the soft sofa to rest. The morning's endless chores had completely worn her out. She sat in total silence, emptying her mind of all thoughts. Sunlight streamed through the wide front doorway. The light spilled across the living room floor and wooden tables, wrapping her in mild golden warmth. It was not stifling or muggy, only wonderfully relaxing. After a short while, Ping slowly stood and stretched her body, rolling her shoulders and arching her spine. She did this to loosen the fatigue built from hours of training before stepping back into the courtyard. Stepping out of the shaded cottage, the blazing midday sun struck her eyes all at once. The sun hung high and glaring, its light flooding every corner. It flooded the sky, so bright that she instinctively squinted. The soft warmth from inside the house faded instantly, and sweltering heat crept over her exposed skin, making her truly feel how scorching noon was. Yet Ping did not mind the intense sunlight. In her past life, she'd never gotten to bask in the sun like this. Now every ray touching her body felt like it replenished her vitamin D. Still, the midday sun was far too harsh. After standing briefly, she headed into the kitchen. She went to prepare lunch. The kitchen door opened off the main hall. From now on, she would uniformly call this space the main hall, no longer referring to it as the main house or living room. To stop cooking fumes drifting, she shut the door tight. As soon as Blackus saw his owner walk into the kitchen, he knew tasty food was coming. He trotted after her, tail wagging wildly, only for the door to slam shut, nearly smacking his nose. Ping paid no notice of the dog's mishap. She pulled fresh ingredients out of her spatial storage, planning a hearty midday meal to nourish her body. She took extra care prepping ingredients at noon, determined to make everything fresh and finely cleaned. Fresh pork ribs were rinsed repeatedly to wash away all blood, drained and chopped into chunks. Ripe tomatoes were washed and sliced, eggs beaten smooth. Seasonal greens had wilted outer leaves plucked off, soaked and rinsed in clear water before draining. Dried mushrooms were soaked to soften, roots trimmed and scrubbed spotless. All ingredients were laid out separately, a vibrant mix of red and green that stoked one's appetite at a glance. Once everything was ready, she lit the fire under the clay stove. Flames roared hot beneath the pan. She poured a little oil and caramelized rock sugar until it turned a glossy amber red. Then she tossed in the ribs and stir-fried quickly. Every chunk of meat coated itself in shiny reddish sauce, sizzling as rich meat aroma burst forth and filled the entire kitchen. She added ginger slices, Aromatic spices to cut gamey smells, and plenty of boiling water covered the lid tightly and simmered over low steady heat, letting the meat soak up all the savory juices until tender and flavorful. On the second stove burner, she stir-fried vegetables over high heat to lock in freshness, preserving their crisp sweetness and bright color to the fullest. Tomatoes and eggs were tossed fast over high flame to create thick, glossy sauce, releasing a sweet, savory fragrance. Beside it, a clay pot held mushrooms. Lean meat simmered gently, brewing a light, sweet broth that warmed the throat. Finally, she steamed a pot of multigrain rice, each grain distinct, soft yet chewy, brimming with pure grain aroma. The midday meal slow-cooked over wood fire boasted perfect color, aroma, and flavor, layered scents blending together warmly. Blackett caught the meaty fragrance and paced anxiously back and forth inside the main hall. Woof woof woof. It smelled incredible, far too delicious to bear. He ached to take a bite. He sat upright, saliva dripping from his tongue onto the floor, his nose twitching nonstop to catch every single whiff. Pinyin lifted the pot lid, and a wave of thick savory scent washed over her. The ribs looked so rich and appealing that she refused to serve them in just any bowl. She rummaged through her storage space for an elegant fine porcelain bowl to hold the braised ribs securely. She pulled open the kitchen door and hurried into the main hall to set it on the dining table. One by one, she brought out the stir-fried greens, tomato egg stir-fry, and mushroom lean meat soup from her storage and arranged them neatly on the table. The spatial storage was truly miraculous. Food never went cold and lost its flavor in there. She filled a large bowl with multi-grain rice, gazing at the lavish spread of lunch, brimming with pure joy. All done, time to eat. The slow-simmered braised ribs glistened red and oily, looking utterly tempting and delicious. A light poke with chopsticks pulled the meat clean off the bone, tender, fine flesh soaked in thick mellow sauce, balanced perfectly between salty and sweet, rich but never greasy. Each mouthful was juicy and dense with protein, exactly what her worn body needed to recover fully. The crisp, bright green stir-fried vegetables cut through the richness of the meat, lightening the palate. The sweet tart tomato egg stir-fry yielded thick, silky sauce that tasted divine poured over rice. The mushroom lean meat broth was light and sweet, gentle and nourishing for her stomach. The multi-grain rice had a satisfying chew and full grain flavor, leaving her pleasantly full. One bite of meat, one of greens, a spoonful of soup, a mouthful of rice, layered, satisfying flavors unfolding with every mouthful. Pinyin chewed slowly, fully surrendering to the warmth of home cooking. The exhaustion and strain from her morning training melted away little by little, lost energy and nutrients fully restored, leaving her body brimming with vitality. When she finished eating, Pinyin patted her stomach and sighed contented. After a fulfilling morning of training, immortals would envy this life. She stood up, scraped leftover ribs, vegetables, and tomato egg stir-fry into the dog bowl, added a big scoop of multi-grain rice, and mixed it well, then filled his water bowl with fresh, clean water. Blackett let out an excited yip and buried his muzzle in the bowl, eating ravenously. The food was absolutely divine, and he loved every bite. Pinyin squatted beside him, resting her chin in her hands to watch him wolf down his meal. His eager eating face was so adorable it melted her heart completely. Times had changed greatly. Blackett had grown far more intelligent. He developed a sense of propriety and bashfulness. Sensing his owner staring at him nonstop, he grew shy for some unknown reason. He slowed his eating pace, even trying to eat and drink with more gentle manners. Pinyin failed to notice his inner awkwardness, assuming he was simply full. She scratched his head and said, "Are you full? If you are, stop eating, there's more for you tonight." Blackie lifted his head, big clear eyes wide and innocent. Woof woof woof. "Not full, I want more food, more meat." As he spoke, he picked a rib out. He took it from the bowl with his mouth, set it on the ground, and tapped it with his paw to signal he wanted it. Pinyin laughed. This was the first time Blackett had clearly communicated his wishes, all thanks to the pet evolution pill she'd given him. Watching him tap the rib over and over, she held his paw down gently. "I get it, I'll give you more ribs." She stood and walked back to the kitchen, spooning extra ribs into his bowl. The rest stayed in the pot, kept warm by residual stove fire. The leftovers were sure to taste even better by evening. Pinyin yawned, a thin trail of tears forming at the corner of her eye. She wiped it away casually, then quickly washed all the pots, pans, and dishes she'd used for cooking. She lifted her arm and sniffed. Her clothes reeked of sweat and cooking smoke. With no schedule to rush for, she planned to take a truly comfortable afternoon nap. She drew a warm bath, changed into cool silky pajamas, and headed for the second bedroom. She stepped slowly into the room to rest. She reached out to tug the sheer curtains hanging beside the window. The fabric was thin and translucent, embroidered with delicate soft patterns. Even drawn closed, it never blocked natural daylight. Soft light filtered through the gauze, diffusing harsh glare and wrapping the whole room in gentle hazy glow. Her gaze fell on the solid wooden bunk bed against the wall, its natural timber warm and substantial. The lower bed measured 1.5 meters wide, spacious and unrestricted. The upper bunk was 1.35 meters wide. The upper bunk was enclosed securely by railings. The bed had railings on 3 sides, with only a wooden ladder leading up on one side. A small wooden slide was attached to the bed frame. Ping'an pulled out a full set of soft, elegant bed linens and began making the bed with care. The fabric was smooth and gentle against the skin, complementing the wooden frame beautifully. She started with the lower bed, smoothing the sheets flat and tucking all edges tight under the mattress. Then she fitted the duvet cover over plump cotton batting that yielded softly under light pressure. She arranged the pillows neat and full. Next, she climbed the ladder to the upper bunk, where the railings formed a private, secure little nook. She made the upper bed with the same careful attention to the linens, ensuring everything was perfectly comfortable and tidy. The muted, lovely bedding covered both bunks, soft duvets contrasting against the wooden frame. It was paired with the sheer light-filtering window curtains. The whole room felt quiet and cozy, filled with the relaxed warmth of living alone amid the mountains. Ping'an pulled the Dreamweaver pillow out. She set the special pillow at the head of the bed. Lying down on the soft mattress, resting her head on the perfectly sized, fluffy pillow, she let out a satisfied sigh. This is lovely. This little bed makes me feel so safe. She tried sleeping flat. Online articles claimed it was the standard healthy sleeping posture, but after a long while she still couldn't drift off. She gave up and curled onto her side instead. She'd been looking forward to the pillow's special effects all morning, and now she could finally rest. In her familiar curled side position, plus the drowsiness that came after a full meal, Ping'an quickly fell asleep. The second her eyes closed, she slipped into an extraordinarily vivid, fulfilling dream. In the dream, she'd escaped every single hardship of city life for good. There were no more endless night shifts as a nurse, no more high-pressure workplace stress, no more cramped, noisy rental apartments. She'd bought a bright, roomy duplex house flooded with natural light. The home had 2 floors. The first floor was simply and neatly decorated. It featured a dedicated bathing area for Blackie and the rest of the space reserved as his play zone. The second floor belonged entirely to her, a walk-in closet, a large soaking tub, a study, a gaming room, and an oversized master bedroom, all fully furnished. She had 2 million yuan in savings, 1.5 million locked in fixed bank deposits, 400,000 invested in wealth management products, and 100,000 kept as emergency funds. She lived off the interest each month, spending exactly what she earned from it. Most days she cooked for herself and exercised, spending free time writing novels online and taking illustration commissions for extra pocket money, though she barely made any income from it. She'd also adopted a black and white border collie puppy, whom Blacka had found wandering outside. The dog was found wandering outside one day. When boredom struck, she'd pack her RV and take the 2 dogs on unplanned road trips, stopping wherever the scenery caught her eye for days on end to sample local food. Once she grew homesick, she'd drive back. Days passed peacefully like this. At 25, she met a boyfriend, and the 2 fell in love quickly before moving in together. They held a small wedding ceremony in the countryside. Married life was sweet at first. They spent every day cooking, eating, and traveling. A year later, her partner brought up wanting to raise a child together, which stunned her completely. They'd agreed long ago that they would live happily, just the 2 of them with their pair of dogs. But he refused to back down on his demands. He said his parents had raised him with great hardship and he needed to have a son to carry on the family line. He claimed his parents had sacrificed their whole lives for him, and it would be ungrateful to leave them without grandchildren. He went on about how difficult his mother's life had been, that he owed her filial care, that life would feel incomplete without children, and that he would leave no bloodline behind after he passed away. Ping'an tried to reason with him directly. She admitted she was terrified of childbearing, the physical toll of labor, lingering bodily discomfort, stretch marks, the strain on bones and muscles. And most of all, the thought of centering her entire life around a child from then on. Her partner dismissed everything. He told her his own mother had returned to heavy farm work right after giving birth to him and promised he would care for her well and be a devoted father. Ping'an felt utterly disappointed. She couldn't recognize the man he'd become at all. She was shocked by his deeply rooted traditional biases. Their back-and-forth arguments dragged on for 3 years. She'd clung to the faint hope that raising a child might bring joy and companionship later in life. Yet every time she pictured the huge physical sacrifice. She made a proposal to him. If the baby could take her surname, she would agree to carry and raise one. He stared at her in utter disbelief, then flatly refused. Only his bloodline could carry on the family name, he insisted firmly. Any child they had to bear his surname. They had a massive fight that day, until all her tears dried and her heart ached so badly she could barely breathe. She could not accept giving birth to a child with another person's last name. They entered a 3-day Cold War. Each night he stayed out all night at internet cafes, only sending short messages to ask if she'd reconsidered. The two had never gotten official marriage certificates, and Ping'an had moved into his home after dating. On the 3rd night, she quietly packed her ID card, bank cards, and all personal documents, gathered both dogs, and slipped away without a word. She returned to her duplex home. At first, living alone weighed heavily on her heart. She'd feared loneliness. But compared to the strain and risks of childbearing, solitude felt far less frightening. She feared being permanently worn down by pregnancy and delivery far more than living by herself. She cut off all contact with her ex and settled back into her daily routine. Gradually, she healed. The sharp resentment she'd carried faded away completely. She spent her days planting flowers, walking her dogs, tending to her health, traveling, and enjoying delicious food without restraint. Financial security truly brought peace of mind. After that, she never dated again. Living alone long-term, she rarely kept close friends, doing nearly everything by herself. Quiet nights inevitably brought twinges of loneliness. Once she'd minded the dog hair and faint pet odor around the house, but now she let both dogs sleep in her bedroom. She stopped drawing full blackout curtains at night, only pulling the sheer gauze layer to filter light. She feared waking up to a pitch-dark empty room. When she turned 37, both dogs' physical condition declined rapidly. They lost their love for running. They stopped gnawing bones, spending nearly all their days curled asleep in their beds. Terrified of losing them, she stocked up on all kinds of nutritional supplements and rarely left the house. She devoted every moment to staying faithfully by their sides. At 38, the female border collie unexpectedly became pregnant. The 2 dogs, one male and one female, had lived together for over a decade without producing puppies, yet the collie was now carrying a litter. Ping'an fell into constant anxiety, suffering from insomnia. She suffered hair loss and appetite loss until she wasted away noticeably. Sensing their owner's distress, the dogs perked up, tugging her outside for walks every day to cheer her up. She threw herself into learning veterinary knowledge focused on canine pregnancy. She studied puppy care, stocking the house with dog medicine and goat milk formula for newborn pups. 2 months later, late one night, she noticed the female collie growing restless and new labor had begun. She rushed them to a hospital. She chose a 24-hour pet hospital for delivery, unwilling to risk any mishaps. The collie grew agitated, scratching at the walls starting at 7 in the evening, and did not go into active labor until midnight. The first puppy emerged, tiny and damp. The pup was wrapped in fetal membrane. The collie, advanced in age, struggled to lick the membrane away. Ping'an's hands trembled as she held the puppy close to its mother's mouth. The collie sensed her unease and nuzzled her palm gently. A second puppy followed, a black and white pup with distinct markings. Back home, Ping'an prepared nourishing post-labor meals for the mother dog and cared for the newborn litter around the clock. When the 2 pups reached 1 month old, they ate solid food. They could bark loudly, far more energetic than Blackie and the collie had been when they first arrived. They darted all over the house, hiding under sofas and stools constantly. They were extremely intelligent, knowing to relieve themselves only on training pats. She named them Little Blackie and Little Border. Once the pups grew older, she brought them for vaccinations and took them out for walks. For dogs trotting side by side always drew crowds of onlookers wherever they went. She set a collective birthday. She chose June 20th as the collective birthday for all her dogs. Early that morning, she prepared a lavish feast and bought 5 small cakes, each inscribed with one dog's name, plus one cake for herself. The 2 older dogs acted strangely restless. They refused to leave her side for even a moment. Pingin sensed something terrible approaching and pulled both dogs tightly into her arms, never letting go. Tears welled in the collie's eyes. Blacka licked her repeatedly. The collie nuzzled Pingin's palm softly. She did this just as she had as a young puppy, then closed her eyes, her breath fading forever. Grief crashed over Pingin like a wave, her throat burning as if scraped by blades, her eyes swollen shut from endless crying. She held the collie's body until it grew stiff and cold, sitting motionless for a full day and night. The dog still wore her birthday costume and tiny celebratory hat. Unable to accept her loss, Pingin kept the collie's body in a freezer. She sat beside it every day in silent mourning. Later, she had the collie cremated. Part of the ashes were made into a pendant necklace she wore close to her chest. The rest of the ashes sat on her nightstand. When Pingin turned 40, Blackie also passed away. Her mental state grew foggy, and she frequently forgot small things. She knew she was suffering from grief-induced depression. She spent 2 years seeking treatment to mend her broken heart. She tried to stop dwelling on her lost companions. Yet every little movement of little Blackie and little Border reminded her of their parents. She often stared at the young dogs, lost in sad memories. She told herself Blackie and the collie would never wish to see her consumed by sorrow. So she took a part-time job at a convenience store to distract herself from her grief. At 40, without a partner or children, she felt disconnected from everyone around her. She sold her duplex house, kept her large sum of savings. She packed the dog's ashes alongside little Blackie and little Border to move to Yunnan. She bought a small courtyard house, growing her own vegetables for meals. She spent sunny days sitting in the yard watching the young dogs play. She stopped pinching pennies, indulging every craving for food and goods. She tried every hobby and experience she'd ever wanted. By the time she reached 60, the young dogs' bodies reached the end of their lifespan. She traveled back to the city where she'd lived years before. By chance, she found her old duplex home up for sale due to its advanced age. She bought it without hesitation. Life had circled back full circle to the place she'd once called home. She reflected that her life had been fortunate, blessed with canine companions every single year. Yet also lonesome, marked by endless goodbyes. The inevitable day finally arrived. Little Blackie and little Border also left her. This time, she remained calm. She followed the same funeral arrangements as she had for their parents, cremation. A portion of their ashes was made into necklaces to wear against her skin. By now, 4 dog ash pendants hung around her neck, representing her 4 beloved companions, her 4 children. At home, she held a quiet, solemn memorial ceremony for herself and all 4 dogs. She dressed in her favorite outfit and styled her hair neatly and precisely. Clutching the dog's old toys and all 4 ash pendants to her chest, she lay down peacefully on her bed. She had lived a life of happiness, laced with quiet loneliness. Yet she harbored no regrets. This was the path she'd chosen. She'd never compromised, and for all her days, she belonged only to herself. Tears slid from her eyes down to her ears, and she closed them for the last time. Xiaohei, Xiaobian, I'm coming to keep you company. Woof 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 woof. Don't be afraid, master. We're right here with you. Pingin jolted awake abruptly. Her fingers brushed her cheek instinctively, meeting a cold, damp patch. She froze for a split second. She'd shed silent tears all through her dream without realizing it. It was soaking the pillow beneath her head entirely. The damp fabric clung to her skin, its chill stark and tangible. Pingin sat upright. Bright daylight filtered through thin sheer curtains and spilled gently into the room. Only a short midday nap had passed in reality, yet inside the dream, she'd lived an entire complete lifetime. That dream life granted her the full freedom she'd always craved. No marriage, no children. There were none of the drudgery of raising a family or endless household chores. There was no lasting physical toll of childbearing. Every season brought her enough food and warm clothes. Her days were loose and unhurried, an unconstrained, perfect existence. She lived alone for decades, her only steady comfort the companionship of her 2 dogs. Yet time was merciless, and birth, aging, sickness, and death were inevitable truths. These were truths she could not outrun. The passing of Xiao Bian and Xiao He marked the first time she'd felt such hollow, aching emptiness. Even now, the memory left a dull, throbbing ache in her heart. Ping'an sat on the bed with her knees drawn to her chest for a long while. She spent time studying her racing emotions. If she could turn back time, she would make the very same choices all over again. She folded the soaked pillow away and stowed it in a sealed storage compartment within her spatial pocket, resolving not to use it lightly again. Shaking off the tangled, bitter grief swirling in her chest, Ping'an slowly swung her legs over the edge of the bed and stood. She changed out of her nightclothes and slipped on the shirt and trousers she'd sweated through that morning. She tied her hair high atop her head before splashing cold water. She washed her face to clear her head. After that long, vivid dream, her temperament had grown far calmer. She no longer fixated on whether solitude would weigh on her. Instead, she turned her mind to building a rich, fulfilling solitary life for herself. Her afternoon training began as scheduled. This featured archery with the longbow, target practice with the crossbow, and blade drills. She decided to add dog obedience training to her routine as well. Ping'an had learned basic archery fundamentals back during military training, though she'd only dabbled casually then. Now, every shot carried real purpose. The mountain sunlight in the late afternoon was soft and mild, no longer scorching. Her spacious, level courtyard made an ideal practice range. Target construction became her immediate focus. No sooner had the thought crossed her mind than she acted. She pulled stacks of split firewood from her spatial storage. She piled them into a waist-high solid heap braced firmly against the courtyard wall. The dense hardwood was thick enough to stop arrows from piercing all the way through. Next, she unrolled a full thick quilt and wrapped it completely around the wood stack, covering every side without a gap. The soft fabric would cushion the arrowheads and prevent the wooden shafts from cracking or warping on impact. She grabbed rough twine meant for bundling firewood, wrapping it twice horizontally and twice vertically. It was to bind the quilt tight against the logs. It needed no separate stand, held steady. The stack was held steady entirely by the courtyard wall. Finally, she drew 3 concentric circles across the quilt's surface with a marker. She smeared a clump of dirt into the innermost ring to mark the bullseye. The whole target was finished in under 10 minutes. Stepping back to admire her work, Ping'an nodded in satisfaction. Not bad at all. I'm quite clever, if I say so myself. With that, she retrieved 2 weapons from her storage space, a single-person longbow, a compact handheld crossbow, and a pouch full of metal-tipped arrows. This was her first time practicing extensively with both ranged weapons. She quickly found their weight, balance, and drawing mechanics entirely distinct. She started with the longbow, which relied solely on upper body pulling strength, and it proved immediately taxing. The solid wooden bow frame felt smooth and substantial. The frame was strung taut with flexible ox sinew. She gripped the bow handle in one hand, knocked an arrow against the string with her other. She hooked her fingertips around the cord and pulled backward. She barely drew it halfway before her forearms trembled uncontrollably. Her shoulders and back burned with strain. It took immense effort to pull the bow fully taut. The longbow had no locking mechanism to hold tension. She had to bear the full weight of the draw with her outstretched arms the entire time. After only a few seconds, her supporting left hand shook. This movement sent the bullseye dancing out of her line of sight. The rough cord chafed her fingertips raw, and her shoulder muscles stayed rigid throughout the draw. The moment she released the string to fire, her entire arm throbbed with dull soreness. The limb hung limp at her side as she waited for the ache to fade. She struggled to master the timing of releasing the string. If she let go too fast, the arrow veered wildly off course. If she hesitated, tension leaked away. The arrow flew weakly, striking only the outermost ring. After a short rest, she switched to the handheld crossbow, expecting the mechanical design to make it easier. But her first attempts remained clumsy and awkward. The crossbow came with a built-in grip, arrow track, and trigger. To ready it, she had to pull a side-cocking lever backward. The lever required significant force to move. It was too heavy for one hand alone, so she hauled it back with both palms until a sharp click signaled the string locked into place. When slotting the short bolts into the track, her movements were uncoordinated. She fumbled repeatedly and dropped bolts onto the dirt. Holding the crossbow steady to aim, her wrist sagged downward without her noticing, forcing her to lift her elbow unnaturally high. Her line of sight, bolt tip, and bullseye never aligned perfectly. She could not gauge the right pressure for the trigger. Squeezing too fast sent bolts careening sideways. while delayed pulls let her arm shake and ruin her aim. Ping'an alternated between longbow and crossbow, struggling to adapt to their opposing mechanics. The longbow demanded sustained full body tension across shoulders and arms, testing stamina and steady stillness. After 3 to 5 shots, her arms burned as if scalded. The crossbow's lock removed the need for constant muscle tension. Yet cocking it was tedious, and keeping the wrist level proved trickier. Aiming level proved far trickier for a novice. The bolts for each weapon also differed drastically in length and weight. She frequently mixed them up. Misnocked arrows produced wildly erratic flight paths. She stood 20 paces away from the target, repeating shot after clumsy shot. When she fully drew the longbow, her arms trembled, sending arrows skimming past the outermost circle. When she steadied the crossbow and pulled the trigger, bolts buried themselves only in the middle layers of cotton. They were far from the dirt bullseye at the center. After dozens of rounds, faint red marks blotted her palms from the abrasive bowstring. Her forearms ached so badly she could barely lift them, and her wrists stiffened from supporting the crossbow's weight. She refused to grow frustrated. After every shot, she walked slowly to the target. She studied the arrow holes to pinpoint where her balance or tension had faltered. Then she retreated to the firing line to adjust her stance, arm height, and breathing rhythm bit by bit. Half an hour of slow trial and error passed before she began to grasp a faint sense. She began to develop muscle memory. When drawing the longbow, she learned to inhale steadily, hold her breath briefly once fully drawn, then release the string smoothly. With the crossbow, she mastered using both hands to cock the lever. She tensed her wrist to keep the weapon level. This action kept it stable while aiming. The two weapons no longer fought against her completely, and she gained a small measure of control. After countless repetitions, a crossbow bolt suddenly loosed, driving straight into the dirt bullseye at the quilt's center. Half its length was buried deep in the soft cotton, fixed fast and unmoving. A faint, quiet sense of relief softened Ping'an's eyes. The lingering hollow sorrow of her dream still lingered in her heart. Yet, even as she fumbled through ranged weapon lessons, satisfaction grew. Tangible satisfaction of growing stronger soothed her deeply. No matter how many lonely days lay ahead, no matter how many painful goodbyes she might face, mastering the bow and crossbow would grant her the ability to defend herself, to guard this mountain courtyard. She could hold fast to the independent, unmarried life she'd chosen. She would bear the loneliness willingly. She pulled the bolt free from the bullseye, stepped back to the firing line. She alternated once more between straining to draw the longbow and laboring to cock the crossbow. Beneath the gentle afternoon mountain sunlight, she chipped away at her awkwardness, refining her accuracy shot by shot. She practiced long past the point where her arms could barely lift. Her palms blazed with heat beneath the bowstring's red abrasions. Her wrists were stiff and heavy, even gripping an arrow growing difficult. She settled cross-legged on the courtyard ground for an extended break. First, she massaged her throbbing forearms and shoulder blades. She rotated her stiff wrists over and over. She scooped cool water from her spatial storage to rinse her scorching palms. It eased the raw burn left by the cord. Xiaohei padded silently to her feet and lay down beside her. She stroked the dog's soft black fur, gazing out at ranges. Looking at the layered green mountain ranges helped empty her mind. She let the lingering melancholy of her dream and the exhaustion of training fade slowly away. A full 30 minutes passed before the burning ache in her shoulders and arms dulled enough for her to recover strength. Setting bow and crossbow aside, she fetched her heavy wood-chopping machete. She moved on to the second segment of her afternoon training, blade combat drills. The machete featured a wide, weighty steel blade and a solid wooden handle that sat heavy in her grasp. Holding it level with one hand for mere moments sent her forearms trembling. She'd only tinkered with proper leverage before, but today she resolved to drill through a full sequence of fundamental strikes. Ping'an stood in the unobstructed center of the yard, planting her feet wide. She did this to stabilize her lower body. She discarded her old habit of relying only on arm strength to swing the blade. She clung to the technique she'd uncovered earlier, channeled power from her waist and hips to drive the blade's motion. For her first move, a vertical downward chop, she sank her hips slightly to build momentum. She twisted her core and let that rotational force carry the machete downward. The sharp edge sliced through the air with a crisp whistle, striking an imaginary tree stump hard. Her movements started stiff and rigid, her body instinctively reverting to brute arm strength. A handful of vertical chops left her lower back aching, her blade swings loose and unsteady. Each strike landed far off her intended mark with no solid weight behind it. Ping'an paused to reset, repeatedly practicing the rotational pull of her hips to connect torso power to her arms. Gradually, she found the rhythm of shifting her center of gravity. The heavy machete rose and fell in steady succession, whistling through the courtyard air. This continued as she cycled through diagonal slashes, horizontal blocks, and sweeping cuts. For diagonal slashes, she shifted her weight sideways and lowered her shoulders. She let the momentum of her body carry the blade down at an angle. For horizontal blocks, she prepared. She tensed her obliques to hold the blade steady across her chest as a defensive barrier. Wide sweeping cuts relied on full torso rotation to extend her reach, the steel carving a broad arc through empty space. The heavy blade rose and fell again and again. Its sharp hum echoed across the yard. After barely a dozen repetitions, her core and back muscles burned with strain. Her newly rested arms tightened with fresh heaviness. Fine beads of sweat dotted her forehead. Occasionally, unbalanced momentum tugged her off kilter as the blade swung. Yet she never rushed. After every 3 strikes, she paused to steady her stance, regulate her breathing. She ironed out any stiff, unnatural kinks in her form. She cycled through the repetitive defensive and offensive sequence endlessly. From rigid, unsteady swings at first, growth came. She slowly learned to flow power smoothly from her hips, the blade's whistle growing deeper and more solid with every pass. Each landing strike carried far more weight. The sun slid westward, spilling warm golden light over her figure as she trained. By the time she finished all archery, crossbow, and blade drills, every muscle in her body felt wrenched apart. They were heavy and sore. Her arms hung useless at her sides, incapable of lifting even an inch. Red welts crisscrossed her palms from the bowstring. Her shoulders, back and core throbbed with searing pain from hours of constant blade work. Sweat matted strands of hair to her forehead, and her legs grew leaden, trembling after even brief standing. She tossed the machete and ranged weapons onto the dirt. She sprawled flat on her back in a star shape. Her chest was heaving with ragged breaths that took ages to calm. The courtyard had grown stuffy after an afternoon of training. Glancing down at Xiaohei resting quietly at her feet, she moved. Ping'an stood and hauled open the sturdy, heavy front gate. Outside stretched a smooth, open green meadow, a small stream, and low thickets in the distance. There was no trace of predatory wild animals nearby. The moment the gate swung fully open, excitement burst. Xiaohei's eyes lit up. Wagging his glossy black tail, he darted out at once to race freely across the grass. He chased fluttering butterflies far into the meadow, paused to sniff wild roadside blooms. He flopped onto the ground to rest when tired, completely unrestrained. Ping'an lines up a wooden stool and sat, watching Xiaohei's joyful runs while letting her training fatigue ebb away. The dog roamed and played for more than half an hour, his coat dusted with tiny grass fragments. He trotted slowly back to the gate. His tongue lolled as he settled at her feet to catch his breath. As strength trickled back into her limbs, sharp hunger surfaced alongside her exhaustion. Ping'an latched the gate, called Xiaohei inside, and walked straight to the kitchen. It was still holding faint warmth from the day's sun. A ceramic bowl held leftover braised spare ribs simmered in savory sauce from midday, paired with a full bowl of mixed grain rice beside it. She lit a small pile of dry twigs beneath the earthen stove. Flames flickered quietly, warm steam curling upward thick with rich meat aroma. It did not take long to heat the ribs through. Ping'an set the meal on a small table and mixed it simply. The tender, bone-off ribs coated the grains in sweet savory sauce, soaking every kernel thoroughly. She needed no extra side dishes, and the simple meal tasted deeply satisfying. Her intense afternoon training had burned massive calories, and the full bowl of rib and rice stew filled her empty stomach completely. It slowly replenished her depleted energy. After finishing her main dish, Ping'an pulled an apple from her spatial storage. Its crisp sweet juice cut through the heavy richness of the meat. Finally, she twisted open a can of fruit drink and drank deep. Cool, smooth sweetness slid down her throat, washing away most of the heat and weariness built up from hours of training. The simple warm meal unwound every tense muscle she'd strained that afternoon. Ping'an dragged a woven recliner into the courtyard and settled into it, Xiaohei curling obediently at her feet to nap. Soft evening breezes drifted through the yard, gifting her a rare stretch of quiet, unhurried leisure. She rested in the chair for ages. While the sharp ache in her limbs softened slightly, sticky sweat clung to her skin. It left her uncomfortable, and she resolved to wash her hair and bathe fully to loosen every tight muscle. She fetched clean spare clothes from storage and poured all her heated water into a large wooden soaking tub. Untying her hair elastic, her black locks fell straight to her waist. Maintaining the long hair took constant effort on ordinary days, and sweat had tangled it tight. It was rough and knotted to the touch. She dampened her hair and lathered it with shampoo, yet the matted strands trapped suds deep in the ends. No matter how many times she rinsed, combing through the tangles pulled painfully at her scalp. After struggling for ages, Pingin stared at the clumps of shed hair scattered across the basin. She grew tired of the burden. She grabbed a sharp small pair of scissors, using the water's surface as a makeshift mirror. She cut carelessly at the lengthy ends. She paid no mind to a neat, fashionable cut. She only chopped her waist-length hair short to ear level, unconcerned with uneven edges. All she wanted was ease and simplicity, to save herself extra effort during training and daily grooming from then on. Once the long strands were cut away, she scooped fresh warm water to rinse loose hair off her shoulders. She scrubbed thoroughly at her scalp, neck and limbs to wash away all the dirt and sweat accumulated through the afternoon's drills. She stepped into the steaming wooden tub, water rising to her shoulders. The warm liquid wrapped around her sore shoulders, back and waist. It dissolved the muscle stiffness built from drawing bows and swinging the machete over days past. She soaked peacefully for a long stretch, waiting until every limb felt loose and limp. Then she climbed out to dry off and slip into cotton loungewear. Putting away all her bathing supplies, Pingin toweled her damp short hair. She climbed the wooden stairs to her second-floor bedroom. She lit the oil lamp, flooding the room with gentle light. Pingin fetched her leather-bound journal and sat at the wooden desk beside the window. She wrote slowly and deliberately to record her reflections on the day's dream, the events of the afternoon, and her training takeaways. She filled the pages with the tangled uncertainty left by her midday dream, her clumsy yet persistent first lessons with bow, crossbow, and blade. Also, Xiaohei's free run in the meadow, and the quiet warmth of her braised rib dinner. When she closed the journal after finishing her entry, the deep mountains outside had fallen into total silence. Evening wind brushed lightly against the window curtains. Pingin dried her short hair fully, then stepped outside to the outhouse. She neatly made her bed, double-checked the courtyard's safety locks and latches. She returned inside to find Xiaohei curled sound asleep on the floor. She slipped beneath soft covers, her body loose and unburdened. She drifted quickly into deep, untroubled sleep. 2 full days slipped by in the blink of an eye. Her days fell into a steady, tranquil routine. Pingin trained diligently without a single day of rest. Dawn barely tinted the sky when Pingin rose each morning. She pulled open all curtains and windows across the 3 second-floor bedrooms. She dragged every bed frame into direct sunlight to air out the bedding thoroughly. After descending to the ground floor to brush her teeth and wash her face, she ate a simple breakfast. She walked Xiaohei and began her full training regimen right on schedule. Her fitness circuit, jump rope, push-ups, sit-ups, planks, flowed smoothly and fluidly now. Her muscles had long grown accustomed to the exertion, no longer burning or leaving her gasping for breath. Once her cardio finished, she moved to the courtyard weapons drills. Gripping the longbow, she lined up steady shots toward her homemade quilt and log target. She drew the cord with stable control and landed arrows with precise aim, each shot cutting cleanly through the air. Cocking the handheld crossbow, aiming and squeezing the trigger became one seamless motion. It was quiet, steady, and deadly accurate. Finally, she wielded her wood-chopping machete through endless cycles of chops, sweeping cuts, and defensive blocks. She drew solid rotational force from her hips and waist. Day by day, her movements grew smoother, more powerful, and assured. The full training session came to an end, and the sun hung high overhead. It cast a mild warmth across the land. Pingin wiped away the thin layer of sweat covering her body. She glanced down at the little black dog that never strayed from her feet. The sleek black puppy sat obediently before her. Its glossy coat was shining, eyes soft and clinging to her every move. Today marked Xiaohei's first birthday. This was the most meaningful day worthy of careful celebration in Pingin's new life. It was a life she'd chosen for complete, unshackled freedom. She had long since made peace with the thought of quiet solitude and inevitable partings in the years ahead. Yet gazing at the loyal companion beside her, she resolved to cherish every moment with him. Aside from her daily training, Ping'an had no pressing chores to tend to. So she planned to craft an elaborate, aromatic birthday feast just for Xiaohei. It would fill the whole courtyard with enticing scents. Solar panels laid out across the yard had stored ample energy under the clear sun. They powered all household appliances without a hitch. Ping'an decided to bake a birthday cake first. She retrieved a round cake pan, electric whisk, fresh animal cream, also farm eggs, low-gluten flour, fine sugar, and pure milk from storage. The chopping board was spotless, completely free of oil or water. Ping'an carefully separated the egg whites from yolks. She mixed milk and flour into the yolks. She stirred steadily to form a smooth, lump-free batter. Connecting the solar-powered outlet, the electric whisk hummed to life. It beat the egg whites at high speed. Within minutes, the clear liquid transformed into stiff, snow-white meringue. It had delicate, uniform ridges, light and perfectly textured. Ping'an folded the batter gently, taking care not to deflate the air bubbles. She poured it into the pan, tapped out air pockets, and slid it into the thermostat electric oven to bake on a timer. As the oven heated, a faint, sweet aroma of eggs and milk drifted slowly through the kitchen. While the cake baked, Ping'an devoted herself fully to prepping ingredients. She pulled fresh produce from her storage space, washing, chopping, and sorting them onto separate plates. She scored chicken wings to let flavor seep in, cut pork belly into neat cubes. She boiled and shelled quail eggs ahead of time, filleted a whole black fish into thin slices to marinate. She removed fishy odors, cleaned and sliced duck blood and tripe. She broke cauliflower into uniform florets, cut pickled mustard greens from an aged jar into sections. She minced ginger, garlic, dried chili peppers, and Sichuan peppercorns. She arranged everything neatly within reach. All ingredients were sorted and laid out in order, ready to be cooked. Once prep work finished, Ping'an walked over to the clay wood-fired stove and lit a fire. Dry pine firewood filled the firebox, crackling as bright flames blazed. It heated the heavy iron wok until it seared hot, imbuing every dish with rich, rustic wok hay. Ping'an began cooking one dish after another. The first was kola chicken wings. She heated a thin layer of oil in the wok, laid the wings flat, and pan-fried them. They were golden and lightly charred on both sides. Savory chicken fat sizzled out. It released an immediate wave of meaty fragrance. Next, she poured in kola and a secret sauce, covered the wok and simmered over medium heat. Every wing was coated in glossy ruby red sauce, glistening with oil before she plated them neatly. At the same time, a second clay wok sat burning beside the first. The second dish was braised pork belly with quail eggs. She dry-fried the pork belly to render out excess fat. It caramelized it naturally, then added ginger slices, spices, and boiling hot water. She simmered slowly over a low wood fire for 40 minutes until the pork turned tender and translucent. She tipped in the pale quail eggs and reduced the sauce together, yielding rich, lustrous meat. Third came classic spicy duck blood and tripe hot pot. Blasting high heat and oil over the wood fire, she sautéed Sichuan peppercorns, dried chilies, ginger, and garlic to build a rich red spicy broth. She added duck blood, tender pork slices, crisp tripe, and side vegetables in sequence. She let everything boil vigorously over high flame. Bold, layered, spicy, and savory steam billowed from the basin. Fourth was fish fillets in sour pickle broth. She pan-fried the fish bones until pale golden. She poured in boiling water and simmered fiercely over wood fire to create milky white soup stock. She tossed in stir-fried aged pickled mustard greens to build a bright sour base. Then she gently slid in the thin fish fillets, poaching them over soft flame until cooked through. The broth was clear and mellow, the fish tender and clean-tasting. The fifth dish was dry-fried cauliflower. Cooking over blazing heat with no added water, she stir-fried the cauliflower to drive out all moisture, searing the edges until lightly charred. She tossed in minced garlic, salt and pepper, and a handful of dried chilies. She mixed evenly so every floret turned dry, fragrant, and slightly crisp. All 5 hearty main courses were cooked fresh over wood fire and plated one after another. They were bright-colored and steaming hot. Just then, the oven chimed to signal the cake was done baking. Ping'an pulled out the cake sponge, round, golden, plump, and springy to the touch. It was baked to absolute perfection. Once it cooled slightly, she spread smooth white cream across the top. She trimmed the edges cleanly, then scattered washed fresh fruits across the surface to decorate. An elegant, sweet fresh fruit cream birthday cake stood complete. Lastly, Ping'an peeled and cut a variety of seasonal fruits. She arranged them artfully into a vibrant fruit platter brimming with juicy, vivid flesh. Every dish was finished, and Ping'an carried them to the wooden table. Glossy spicy duck blood hot pot, warming sour fish soup, sticky sweet cola chicken wings, also deep braised pork belly with quail eggs, dry fragrant stir-fried cauliflower. They were paired with the delicate fruit cream cake and bright fruit platter. It filled the whole table to the brim. Warm steam curled upward. It wove together meat aromas, thick savory sauce, bold spice, fresh fruit sweetness, and gentle cake fragrance. It spread through the entire courtyard in a rich, comforting haze that stirred a powerful appetite. Ping'an set aside a large portion of food suitable for Xiaohe. She carefully picked out all spicy irritants like chili and peppercorns, fall off the bone-tender wing meat, also boneless soft fish fillets from the sour soup, melt-in-your-mouth lean braised pork, and flavorful soft quail eggs. She also cut thick chunks of sponge cake with minimal cream. And sweet, tart-free fruit flesh, piling it high into his oversized dedicated food bowl. Xiaohe had circled the stove all morning, nose twitching nonstop as he tracked drifting meat scents. Now, catching sight of the overflowing bowl of food, he wagged his thick black tail. It smacked against his body, rising lightly onto his hind legs and letting out soft, eager whimpers. His eyes were fixed firmly on the meal. Go ahead and eat, Xiaohe. Happy birthday. You're my one and only precious boy, and I'll always love you. With that, Ping'an patted the top of his head to signal he could dig in. Xiaohe immediately lowered his head and ate heartily. The tender wing meat dissolved at a single bite. Sweetmeat juice flooded his mouth as he chewed noisily, swallowing quickly. The fall-apart lean pork required no effort to tear, each mouthful wrapped in thick savory sauce. It made his ears twitch with delight. The soft sponge cake carried a faint sweet egg flavor, his favorite treat of all. He nibbled at it slowly, savoring every bite. Before long, he licked the sweet fruit flesh. Juice dampened the fur around his muzzle. He ate with complete focus and satisfaction. His black coat rose and fell with every swallow, not leaving a single scrap of meat or cake crumb unlicked. Half the full bowl vanished in a matter of minutes, his round eyes never leaving the food bowl. After settling the dog to his feast, Ping'an sat down to slowly enjoy the elaborate birthday meal. First, she picked up a cola chicken wing. The skin was soft yet chewy. It was coated in thick, balanced sweet savory sauce that never cloyed. The chicken had soaked up every drop of flavor, tender enough to slip off the bone. Each mouthful burst with juicy meat, perfectly balanced and more delicious with every chew. Next, she tried the braised pork belly. She enjoyed the meat and quail eggs. The pork was soft enough to melt on her tongue. All fatty richness was fully stewed away to leave a mellow, lingering savor without heaviness. The quail eggs had soaked up the broth, rich sauce coating their firm, tender centers. It was delightful to pop whole into her mouth. A spoonful of spicy duck blood hot pot delivered layered heat, spicy without harsh bite. Numbing peppercorn notes were soft and gentle. The duck blood was smooth and porous-free. Pork slices were tender, tripe crisp, and springy. The broth clung to every single ingredient. It had an intensely savory, rice-complementing taste. She then tasted the sour fish soup. The fillets were paper-thin, delicate, and dissolving instantly. They were entirely free of fishy tang. The aged pickled mustard greens brought bright, refreshing sourness. It cut through richness, the warm broth sliding down her throat mellow and comforting. Last, she sampled the dry fried cauliflower. The unique wood-fired wok aroma lingered on her tongue. Edges were crisp and charred, while the center retained the vegetable's clean, natural sweetness. It was salted to perfection to balance heavier meat dishes. Each hearty main hit exactly the right cooking point, flavors full and layered. The rustic wood-fire taste was irreplaceable by any electric cookware. Once she finished the savory dishes, Ping'an cut a slice of cake. She ate the fruit cream cake slowly. The cream was lightly sweet and non-greasy, the sponge soft and airy on the palate. It blended with the bright fresh fruit tang for a gentle, warming sweetness that never grew cloying. Finally, Ping'an picked up a toothpick. She worked her way through the fruit platter. Every variety of fruit was fresh and juicy, pure natural sweetness clearing the heavy richness of the meal. She ate leisurely, utterly content with the feast, lingering until late afternoon. A soft wind swept through the courtyard. Sunset light draped over her frame. Ping'an turned her head to look at Xiaohe, his belly round and full as he curled beside his empty bowl. He was licking his lips to rest, a faint soft smile tugging at her eyes. She remained firm in her resolve. She would rather embrace lifelong quiet solitude. She would bid farewell to loved ones year after year than bind herself to the restraints of marriage. Xiuhei lay lazily in the doorway of the main house, full and sleepy. He was soaking up the sun. He flicked his black tail every now and then as he rested peacefully. Ping'an finished her last bite of fruit, tidying the table and washing kitchenware methodically. She cleaned every corner of the cooking space thoroughly. She rinsed all tableware clean, dried, and stowed them. She put them in cabinets, wiped grease and food scraps from the stove, and organized utensils and seasonings. She swept and mopped the floors, restoring the once messy cooking area to spotless order. After spending the whole morning cooking, Ping'an's skin clung with fumes. The sweat and smoke left her feeling sticky and uncomfortable. She mixed warm bathwater and settled into a large wooden tub to bathe thoroughly. She planned to skip afternoon training today, taking the chance to unwind for Xiaohei's birthday. Warm water washed over her skin, rinsing away all traces of smoke, sweat, and dust. Once finished, she dried her body and short hair with a towel, blow-dried her locks, and changed into loose, soft cotton loungewear. She felt fresh and clean from head to toe. With all chores wrapped up, Ping'an checked the courtyard. She latched both front gates and climbed the stairs to the middle bedroom on the second floor. The afternoon hung quiet and calm. Ping'an stretched out fully on the soft lower bunk bed. She let her body unwind completely. Her consistent daily training and stress-free days had vastly improved her sleep quality lately. It did not take long for her to relax fully and drift into a deep afternoon nap. She slept soundly and peacefully, untroubled by dreams. When Ping'an roused slowly, twilight had fallen outside the windows. The bright midday glow faded into soft dimness, no golden sunset light filtering into the room. Only faint gray dusk crept over the distant forested hills. Ping'an sat up slowly. Her body was loose and light after a full rest, only lingering drowsiness remaining. She smoothed out the bed sheets, folded her quilt neatly, tidied the bedroom simply. Then she descended the stairs at a leisurely pace. With nothing to occupy her evening hours, Ping'an set out to wash clothes. She wanted to wash all the dirty laundry accumulated over the past 2 days. She gathered every soiled set of training and daily clothes into a basin, filled it with water and mild soap liquid to soak. Ping'an scrubbed each garment patiently, paying extra attention to stained colors. She scrubbed cuffs and waistbands saturated with sweat, then rinsed each piece repeatedly to remove all soap residue. Once every item was washed clean, she shook them straight and hung them evenly on the courtyard clothesline to dry. The west side of the yard stood unobstructed, soft evening breeze swaying the laundry. Streaks of tangerine sunset painted the distant sky. After finishing the laundry, Ping'an unlatched the front gate to let Xiaohei run free and play to his heart's content. Xiaohei bounded over the cool evening grass, darting back and forth across the open meadow. He was wild and carefree. Ping'an stood at the gate, gazing west at the sunset clouds and admiring the evening twilight. Xiaohei raced about for more than half an hour, returning to her side, dusted with grass clippings once he'd exhausted his energy. Ping'an closed the gate again, inspected the barriers, and stepped inside. Darkness slowly wrapped the entire mountain forest, leaving the small courtyard wrapped in silence. Ping'an wiped her hands and cheeks simply, washed her feet once more, and returned upstairs to her bedroom. She had eaten far too much at noon and felt no hunger, so she skipped dinner entirely. Sitting at the wooden desk beside the window, she opened her diary and picked up her pen to record the day's events. New calendar, day 7 old calendar, June 20th clear weather. A full week has passed since I arrived in this world. I have slowly grown accustomed to this life without cell phones. There was daily training, cooking meals, walking Xiaohei sleep. Surprisingly, my physical condition is far better than it once was, and my nights are far less plagued by restless dreams. Today marks Xiaohei's birthday. He turns 1. He ate a pet evolution pill. It strengthened his physique immensely, so I hold no fears over his lifespan. The power of the system has proven itself plainly to me. After writing her entry, Ping'an capped her pen and set it back in the holder. She knew she would not sleep straight through till morning, so she felt no rush as she opened her system to complete her daily sign-in. Ding! Congratulations on receiving Lotus of Serenity ×1, for Directions Paper Fortune Game ×1, Vintage Gramophone ×1. Ping'an found the three rewards rather puzzling at first glance, unable to guess their functions from their names alone. Curious, she tapped each item to pull up its description. Lotus of Serenity, a cultivation artifact. Sitting atop the lotus, while cultivating accelerates progress and boosts comprehension. Yet its power only activates when submerged in water. For directions, paper fortune game, a beloved childhood pastime toy. It bears 8 sides. Activating it drops random copper coins once per day. Vintage gramophone, playing its melodies soothes restless emotions and lifts one's mood significantly. Ping'an pulled out the Lotus of Serenity to examine it. The artifact took the shape of a single intact lotus leaf, its surface a gentle emerald green fading outward to pale lake green. It was crisscrossed with fine radiating leaf veins, its edges rippling in natural undulating waves. The whole leaf glowed translucent and lustrous, wrapped in a faint soft water sheen. Ping'an pricked her fingertip with practiced ease, letting a drop of warm blood fall onto the leaf's surface. The bead of blood vanished instantly, fully absorbed by the leaf without leaving a trace. The next second, the entire lotus leaf burst into radiant light, layers of emerald radiance surging outward. Faint crimson streaks wound through its veins, the glow soft yet strikingly bright. As the light dimmed gradually, the artifact had bonded to her as its master. Ping'an sensed a gentle mental link between them. With a single thought, the lotus shifted size at her will. It could shrink down small enough to rest in her palm, or expand wide and flat enough for one person to sit comfortably atop it. Truly worthy of being an artifact, Ping'an exclaimed aloud. She knew nothing of cultivation for now, yet the system never supplied useless items. This could only mean one thing. Future sign-ins would surely reward cultivation manuals. She might even cultivate far enough to achieve eternal youth and longevity. Haha, the thought made her laugh out loud. Xiaohei, roused from his sleep, padded over to stand before her and tilt his head in confusion. Ping'an scratched the top of his head and sent him back to bed to rest. Next, she retrieved the 4 directions paper fortune game. She let out a small surprise sound. She had just been wondering if it matched the paper toy from her childhood, and it was exactly the same. It looked crafted from paper, printed with the 4 large characters for East, West, South, and North. Yet when Ping'an tugged at its edges it did not tear. She could not identify what material formed it. Holding it in her hands, she folded and manipulated it with familiar childhood movements. A crisp tinkling sound rang out, several copper coins clattering to the floor. They rolled across the wood. Ping'an picked them up to inspect. Each copper coin was cast from solid copper. They were smooth and flat with no square hole at the center. They bore a matte antique bronze finish. They had uniform thickness, edges polished smooth. This process ensured they would not cut skin. Both faces carried the same simple mountain engraving, solid and weighty in her palm. When knocked together they emitted a clear, crisp chiming tone. Ping'an turned the coins over between her fingers, pondering silently. These must be the common circulating currency of this world. This realm possessed a complete monetary system and human settlements. Though she had not crossed paths with any people during her days living deep in the mountains, it seemed she would need to exercise greater caution from now on. Accessing her spatial storage required care, as being spotted would bring unneeded trouble. Last was the vintage gramophone, authentically old-fashioned in design. Its cabinet was carved from deep brown solid wood fitted with polished silver metal hardware. It had a curved metal horn, tone arm, and base. These pieces fused into one cohesive piece. Its turntable and dials were exquisitely crafted in retro style. Ping'an stroked its surface fondly and set it upon her desk, instantly elevating the room's elegant atmosphere. She gently lowered the needle onto the record, and music flowed. Soft, unfamiliar melody flowed forth. It was beautiful beyond anything she had ever heard. The unease lingering in her heart from thinking about the copper coins melted away little by little. It was calmed by the gentle tune. Ping'an hummed along to the soft melody. She shifted her feet unconsciously as she twirled through a solo waltz, her figure spinning light and graceful. When the final notes of her lone waltz faded, Ping'an dipped into a soft curtsy. One hand rested lightly at her side in a poised, elegant closing bow. The room stood empty save for the sleeping black dog, no audience to watch her dance. Yet genuine joy crinkled the corners of her eyes, her heart light and unburdened. What a wonderful item! Simply listening to music each day fills my heart with warmth. Ping'an placed the 4 directions paper fortune game on her desk so she would not forget the free copper coins it produced. She shrank the Lotus of Serenity down to palm size and set it beside her bed to glow as a nightlight. I'm such a clever girl, making full use of everything I get. Once she finished all these tasks, Pingin yawned, walked to the washroom, turned off the gramophone, and fell into a deep sleep. Time slipped by quickly. More than 10 days passed. These quiet, uneventful days passed until Little Black's birthday arrived. Pingin no longer worried about making a living. Each morning, she would get up. She would wash up, take the dog for a walk and eat breakfast, complete her daily check-in. And she would stick rigidly to her physical training routine. After keeping this schedule for days on end, her movements grew steady, precise, and sharp. Her body became firm and toned. Free from all pressure, spending every day doing things she loved, she smiled more often. After each training session, Pingin would boil several large vats of hot water and store them inside her storage space. Before long, the space held 50 full vats of hot water. She had run out of large storage vats entirely, leaving only buckets. The plastic buckets, wooden tubs, and basins were all she had left. She resolved to buy more water containers the next time a market fair opened. She planned to freeze plenty of ice over winter, as well as collect rainwater and mountain stream water for reserves. She also owned solar panels and storage batteries. Truthfully, the stored electricity could power her home for more than half a year. She had even fully charged her electric scooter. She just had no occasion to ride it for the time being. Ever since learning that other people existed in this world, Pingin stayed extremely cautious. She had no idea if electric scooters were common here, or if electricity was even available to others. Every day she climbed to the attic with a telescope to scan surroundings. She never spotted any humans, though she caught sight of numerous wild animals far off in the distance, none of which posed any threat. The ghost brambles and moonlight puffs had both sprouted. Pingin transplanted the moonlight puffs into flower pots. She placed one each in the kitchen, dining room, bedroom, and stairwell. The plants resembled a cross between dandelions and fireflies, tiny clusters that emitted a soft, warm yellow glow. Her moonlight puffs had thrived under her care, yet the ghost brambles remained fragile. The seedlings were barely knee-high. Their vines were thin, supple, and emerald green, lined evenly with tiny, sharp thorns. Pingin dared not touch them with her bare hands, for they looked painfully prickly. She had originally intended to build a trellis for them. She wanted them to climb and cover the courtyard walls, yet they had barely grown an inch. She had added fertilizer multiple times with zero visible progress. So she comforted herself that ghost brambles were simply an extremely slow-growing species. One afternoon, Pingin trained in the courtyard as usual. She had just sheathed her blade and wiped sweat from her forehead when the stretch of warm, clear weather suddenly turned still. The once bright sky slowly veiled itself beneath a thin layer of gray clouds. An eerie silence fell over the entire mountain forest. The wind died away. Birds fell silent. The air thickened with damp, cool moisture, a clear sign autumn rain was coming. The next instant, boom, a deep, rumbling thunderclap rolled out from the horizon. This was autumn thunder, unique to early fall. Unlike the sharp, deafening summer lightning storms that split the sky open, autumn thunder lingered low beneath heavy cloud cover, its sound dull, heavy, and drawn out. It echoed slowly between the mountain ranges as it drew nearer. It was not shrill or fierce, yet it carried the weight of the whole sky pressing down. Wave after wave of muffled rumbles trundled across the hills. It made tree branches tremble faintly, without a single gust of wild wind. After several low peals of thunder, there was no sudden wind or drastic shift. Fine, endless autumn rain threads drifted down from the clouds. A thin mist shrouded the entire courtyard. Delicate, translucent raindrops drifted lightly onto the eaves, ground, and foliage. It created a soft, gentle pattering sound. Pingin froze where she stood in the yard. She had lived in this world for over 20 days. Every single day had been cloudless and clear. This was her first time seeing rain. Wonder and delight welled up inside her unreservedly. Instinctively, she lifted her right palm into the open air. Cold fine raindrops landed on her skin. They spread tiny damp patches, a faint coolness creeping up her fingertips. Pingin stood in the downpour, tilting her face upward to let the rain fall on her skin. She simply savored the sensation of rainfall. Suddenly, something important crossed her mind. She hastily stowed her homemade archery targets into storage. Then she scrambled to gather the laundry hanging on the clothesline and shut all the windows tight. The targets would be fine if they got wet. They would dry out once the sun returned. But Ping'an frowned thinking about her freshly washed clothes. She realized she would have to launder them all over again. Her daily chores were finished, and she was utterly thrilled to see the monotonous clear skies finally broken by rain. She pulled a wooden framed oil paper umbrella from her storage space and opened it. Imagining herself as a noble young lady from ancient times, she wandered slowly back and forth across the courtyard. The oil paper umbrella shielded her from the fine drizzle. She paused every few steps and pushed open the courtyard gate. She gazed at the knee-high young ghost brambles lining the wall base. Water glistened on their thorns. The vines, saturated with moisture, unfurled soft new tendrils. Ping'an stood still, staring out at the mist-shrouded distant mountains. She took in every novel sight of the rainy landscape, a faint smile lingering on her face. She was thoroughly enchanted by her first autumn rain. Little Black was equally overjoyed. He opened his mouth to catch raindrops, darted back and forth by the gate. He shook his soaked coat, sending sprays of water flying. Several droplets even splashed straight into Ping'an's mouth. Ugh, yuck, she stepped back quickly. Shallow puddles pooled across the ground within minutes, turning everything muddy and slippery. After just a few steps, mud coated the soles of her shoes. Ping'an glanced at the ghost brambles and saw they showed no signs of distress. She called Little Black back inside, closed the main gate, and walked into the central hall. She shook the water off her oil paper umbrella and propped it upside down by the hall entrance. Listening to the steady patter of rain, an idea came to her. She would create a cozy little nook to sit and enjoy the rainfall. She took out a small round log table with pale walnut grain, its wood smooth and polished. All edges were sanded into soft rounded curves, giving it a calm, elegant texture. Perfect, she murmured. She set it by the hall doorway. Then she fetched a soft off-white fabric armchair. She brushed her palm over its plush, gentle material. The padded backrest was full and fluffy, inviting total relaxation. Once the chair was arranged, Ping'an retrieved a long matte white porcelain tray. The tray was edged with thin gold lines. It was simple yet refined, cool and smooth to the touch. She neatly laid out assorted snacks on the tray, crisp hand-dried sweet potato strips, translucent soft hawthorn candied in honey. There were plump salt-baked hickory nuts, sweet air-dried wild peach slices, and thin fragrant sesame cakes. The 5 treats were arranged tidily, their varied hues fresh and appetizing. After setting out the snacks, Ping'an took a delicate fine porcelain teapot. She had washed every usable item in her storage space in advance, so it was spotlessly clean. She poured boiling stored hot water inside, added a tea bag. She set the teapot atop a tiny constant temperature tea warmer to simmer. The pot simmered on low heat. Wispy steam curled upward, and a delicate tea fragrance quickly filled the air. With everything ready, Ping'an sank slowly into the soft armchair. She lifted the warm porcelain teacup, blew gently, and sipped slowly. The mellow sweet tea slid smoothly down her throat, chasing away the damp chill of the rainy day. After finishing her tea, she picked at the different snacks on the tray at her leisure. She alternated soft, sweet preserves and nuts. She savored the layered sweet and nutty flavors. Listening to the rain, drinking tea, nibbling snacks, she felt utterly content. Once full and satisfied, she set down her teacup and leftover snacks and pulled out a thick, complete guidebook on medical wilderness survival skills. The book was solid and well-organized, packed with detailed, practical knowledge. She leaned back against the fluffy chair, sitting lazily and comfortably, quietly turning the pages amid the soft patter of rain outside the eaves. She was earnestly studying wilderness first aid, injury treatment, and forest survival hazard avoidance. The dim rainy light inside the house prompted her to move 2 pots of moonlight puffs over, one beside the round table, one by the doorway. Their warm yellow glow chased away the surrounding darkness, creating a wonderfully soothing atmosphere. Ping'an thought to herself that if she owned a mobile phone, she would take at least 800 photos to preserve this moment. 5 full days of lingering autumn rain finally came to an end. The clouds scattered completely, revealing a clear, bright autumn sky once more. Gentle warm sunlight spilled over the mountain wilderness. The world washed clean by rain looked vivid and fresh. The forest foliage glowed emerald green, and the air carried a refreshing mix of sweet damp soil and crisp plant scents, cool and pleasant. Ping'an's mood lifted at the sight of the clear sky. On the first rainy day, she brewed tea, ate snacks, read books, cooked hot pot, collected rainwater, and fell asleep listening to the rain. She had been overjoyed. On the second day, she ate instant noodles with spicy pickled cabbage, imagining she was dining alone at a Korean restaurant. She was still perfectly happy. On the third day, she enjoyed a lavish barbecue and sorted through her overflowing supplies in storage. She was brimming with satisfaction and fulfillment. By the fourth and fifth days, cabin fever set in. She found herself eagerly waiting for sunshine. Truly, people never appreciate what they have until it fades. After this thought, Pingin leaned against the eaves gazing at the layered, distant hills, her mind clear and logical. 5 straight days of heavy rain had thoroughly soaked the forest's fallen leaves, dead timber, and topsoil. The humidity and temperature were ideal conditions for wild mushrooms to sprout. All varieties of autumn fungi, wood ear mushrooms, and wild vegetables would have emerged in abundance. This was the perfect time to head into the mountains to forage wild delicacies. She resolved immediately to get fully geared up and collect mountain produce. She quickly tidied up all household chores. First, she washed every garment that had grown damp from days of rain. She shook each smooth and hung them on the courtyard clothesline to air dry. Next, she carried all bedding and cotton mattresses outside, spreading them across sunlit, well-ventilated ground. She baked them thoroughly in the sunlight and drove out every trace of dampness. By evening, the bedding would regain its fluffy softness. It would be filled with the clean, warm scent of sunshine. Once this was done, she began carefully preparing protective gear for her mountain expedition. Grass grew damp after rain, and insects and snakes were highly active. Pingin never took survival risks lightly. Constant caution had become second nature to her. She changed into sturdy, thick, dark gray outdoor long sleeves and trousers. She folded and tightly secured the pant cuffs with leg ties to hug her ankles completely. It blocked any bugs, grass insects, or leeches from crawling up her legs. She cinched her sleeve cuffs equally tight to cover every inch of wrist skin without gaps. On her feet, she laced up non-slip, wear-resistant high-top canvas hiking shoes with deep, rugged treads. They were capable of handling slippery mud, loose stones, and moss with ease, their tall uppers shielding her ankles for stable walking. To prevent scratches from mountain weeds and branches, as well as stings or bites from venomous creatures, she prepared to finish her outfit. She pulled on thin, tight protective gloves to cover both hands. Fully outfitted, not a sliver of exposed skin remained vulnerable. This gear makes me feel completely secure, she thought. Once fully equipped, she retrieved a large layered padded bamboo foraging basket from storage and slung it over her shoulders. The soft interior padding kept fungi intact without crushing them during transport. She then took a solid 1-meter hardwood walking stick, sanded smooth and tough. It was ideal for brushing aside tall grass, testing unstable muddy ground, scaring small creatures out of undergrowth. It was also for tapping vegetation to ward off snakes. Finally, she fastened a small sharp folding knife to her waist in a secure sheath. It was handy for trimming stray branches and clearing foliage as needed. With all preparations finished, Pingin double-checked the house and locked the courtyard gate. She glanced at the knee-high ghost brambles lining the wall base, which appeared to have drunk their fill of rain over the 5 wet days. Their thorns glistened with moisture, and they seemed to have grown more vigorously. Though still small now, they would reliably guard the courtyard walls in time. "I'm heading out, little brambles. Look after our home for me," she called softly. She whistled for Little Black, and the girl and her dog set off slowly toward the outer foothills nearby. Her dwelling sat atop the safest, flattest central plateau of the entire mountain range. Wide, smooth green meadow stretched out before the house, and low rolling hills rose behind it. 4 to 5 kilometers straight east lay the main stream cutting through the mountain chain. Pingin knew her limits and prioritized safety above all else. She planned only to explore the woodland fringe at the foot of the mountains, never venturing deep into the shadowy, unknown inner forest. She carefully avoided every potential hidden danger. The post-rain mountains smelled rich of damp earth and green plants. The ground was covered in slippery mud and small puddles, making walking difficult. But her sturdy hiking shoes handled the terrain without trouble. Pingin moved at a slow pace, observing everything along the path and noting the surrounding flora to reference later. Little Black trotted behind her wearing a dog coat. It was his first time in full outerwear. He walked awkwardly, unused to the extra layers. After walking roughly half an hour, they reached the woodland edge at the foothills. The moment she stepped beneath the trees, a faint earthy aroma of wild mushrooms drifted through the air. Pingin brightened with delight and slowed her pace at once, gripping her walking stick firmly. She swept tall weeds and low shrubs gently to either side, scanning the forest floor in layers. She first examined the thick carpet of fallen leaves covering the ground, then checked fallen dead wood and old tree stumps. Lastly, she checked the boundary zones where woodland met grassland, the three primary habitats for wild mushrooms and wood ears. Pinyin advanced slowly, inspecting every patch closely. The forest floor lay buried under a dozen centimeters of aged broadleaf humus, turned soft and dark by rain. It sank slightly underfoot. She used her walking stick to brush away piles of brown decaying leaves. She focused on gently sloped ground that stayed well drained, partially shaded yet touched by dappled sunlight. Such damp, aerated soil was where clusters of Rusula virescens, commonly known as green brittlegill mushrooms, most often grew. Sure enough, after sweeping away the leaf litter, tiny mushroom caps half buried in humus came into view. Their pale gray-green tops peeked out, easily identifiable as green brittlegills. Rusula virescens was one of the safest edible wild fungi to forage after early autumn rain, with no toxic properties. Pinyin warned Little Black not to nibble anything he found on the ground, and the dog seemed to understand. He nodded his head in an almost human fashion. Reassured, she knelt halfway down, pinching the mushroom stem firmly at its base right against the soil. She twisted slowly clockwise to pull the entire fungus free from the earth intact. This method kept the underground mycelium unbroken and left no mushroom fragments behind in the soil. She only picked fully mature, fully open large mushrooms, leaving thumb-sized young sprouts untouched. It protected the fungal root networks and allowed more mushrooms to grow later. After plucking each mushroom, she tapped away wet mud clinging to its base. She placed it carefully on the soft padding inside her foraging basket to stop the fragile caps from crushing against one another.